Good morning and welcome to everyone to today's meeting, both in Council chambers and joining virtually. Can I remind members to keep their microphones on mute throughout the meeting unless they are speaking to assist with the operation of the cameras. All members and officers, whether in the chambers or joining via Teams, to use the chat box in Teams to indicate if they wish to speak. Can I also advise elected members and the public there will be comfort breaks during the meeting as necessary. I would ask the clerk to confirm any apologies and take a roll call of attendance, please. Scott.
Thank you, Provost. Good morning, everyone. For the purpose of those watching online, I'm just going to ask members to confirm that they're present in the meeting. We've received apologies from Councillor Audrey Coates, Councillor Harry Coates and Councillor Sheila McCall. So I'll now just move through councillors' names and if they can confirm that they're present. Councillor Ahern. Councillor Bailey.
Present.
Deputy Provost Baird. Councillor Barnacle.
Present.
Councillor Liz Barrett.
Present.
Councillor Peter Barrett.
Present.
Councillor Braun.
Present.
Councillor Brock.
Present.
Councillor Donaldson.
Present.
Councillor Drysdale.
Present.
Councillor Duff.
Present.
Councillor Forbes.
Good morning, I'm here.
Councillor Gray.
Present.
Councillor Illingworth.
Present.
Councillor James.
Good morning. Present.
Councillor Jarvis.
Here.
Councillor Lane.
Present.
Councillor Lyle.
Present.
Councillor Massey.
Present.
Councillor McCall.
Present.
Councillor McDade.
Present.
Councillor McEwen.
Present.
Provost, we've heard from yourself. Councillor Parrott.
Present.
Councillor Pover.
Present.
Councillor Purvis.
Present.
Councillor Rebeck.
Present.
Councillor Reid.
Present.
Councillor Robertson. Do we have Councillor Robertson?
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Sarwar.
Present.
Councillor Shires.
Present.
Councillor Simpson. Councillor Smith.
Morning to everyone. Present.
Councillor Stewart.
Present.
Councillor Waters.
Present.
Sorry, Councillor Waters.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Williamson
Present.
and Councillor Wilson.
Present.
Thank you, Provost. We have all members present other than the 3 apologies. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Members, are there any declarations of interest? No? That's good. Item 3 is minutes of previous meetings. Members, can we approve the minute of the Special Council meeting of the 23rd of February 22? We have a point of order. Councillor McDade, sorry, I didn't see you.
Thank you, Provost. Provost, I would like to move under Standing Order 17.1, item P1 on the agenda be deferred until after the local government elections. In my view, it is inappropriate to be deciding on matters of policy and spending a week before an election and 2 weeks after voting has already started by post. This is in effect a lame duck council with a minimum of over a quarter of members who will not be here in office in a week's time, and potentially more of us. We are well into the period for the election, and I feel it is important that this major decision be deferred, as the outcome of this decision could impact the local government election. I therefore move the item be deferred.
Thank you, Councillor McDade. I'll ask Lisa if she could maybe respond.
Do you have a seconder? Councillor McDade. Yeah, Councillor Lyons has seconded. I just need a chance to get up standing orders.
Are we all happy with that? Sorry.
Yeah, I'm very happy to second that for all the reasons articulated by Councillor McDade. It's unfortunate this is apparently the first chance we've had in 2 years for officers to bring this, and I don't feel that 6 days before polls, 7 days till we vote, that we should be discussing this. And I think it should be a decision. It's public money involved in this, that we council, whoever that should take that decision at the first possible opportunity after.
Thank you very much, Provost. Just that I would put forward an amendment that we do hear the paper today. This is a private paper, and it is an important part of our economic well-being strategy. And this is the opportunity to discuss the paper today. It's in there. It is a private paper. I would find others in the chamber, and I think we should move ahead with the paper.
Councillor Duff.
There we go. I'm happy to second that amendment. Thank you.
Okay, Provost, in terms of standing orders, we can now move simply to a roll call vote to determine the procedural motion that we have in front of us. So we have the motion from Councillor McDade, seconded by Councillor Lang, to defer the private report that we have at the end of the agenda. We have an amendment from Councillor Lyle, seconded by Councillor Duff, to proceed. Provost, we have a point of order from Councillor Peter Barrett.
Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Provost, and it may have been superseded, but I would have thought that the appropriate time to debate a deferral would have been when we actually considered the item on the agenda and not before any other business.
Provost, that would have been an opportunity, but the procedural motion has been moved. So in terms of standing orders, we should determine that position now. Provost, I'm now happy to move to the vote. So if members, when I call out their name, if they could confirm that they're voting for the motion by Councillor McDade or the amendment from Councillor Lyle. Councillor Ahern.
Amendment.
Councillor Bailey.
Motion.
Deputy Provost.
Amendment.
Councillor Barnacle.
Amendment.
Councillor Liz Barrett.
Amendment.
Councillor Peter Barrett.
Amendment.
Councillor Braun.
Amendment.
Councillor Brock.
Motion.
Councillor Donaldson.
Motion.
Councillor Drysdale.
Motion.
Councillor Duff.
Amendment.
Councillor Forbes.
Amendment.
Councillor Gray.
Motion.
Councillor Illingworth.
Amendment.
Councillor James.
Amendment.
Councillor Jarvis.
Amendment.
Councillor Lane.
Motion.
Councillor Lyle.
Amendment.
Councillor Massey.
Motion.
Councillor McCall.
Amendment.
Councillor McDade.
Motion.
Councillor McEwen.
Motion.
Provost.
Amendment.
Councillor Parrott.
Motion.
Councillor Pover.
Motion.
Councillor Purvis,
Motion.
Councillor Rebeck,
Motion.
Councillor Reid,
Amendment.
Councillor Robertson, sorry, Councillor Robertson, can you repeat that? Amendment, thank you. Councillor Sarwar,
Motion.
Councillor Shires,
Amendment.
Councillor Simpson,
Amendment.
Councillor Smith,
Amendment.
Councillor Stewart,
Motion.
Councillor Waters,
Motion.
Councillor Williamson,
Motion.
and Councillor Wilson.
Amendment.
Provost, there are 17 votes for the motion and 20 votes for the amendment. The amendment is therefore carried, and therefore Council's decision is to consider the final private report on the agenda. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Scott. We'll go back to item 3. Members, can we approve the minute of the special council meeting of the 23rd of February 2022? Thank you. And can I also ask members if we can approve the previous minute of the council meeting of the 9th of March 2022? Thank you. On item 4, I'm going to now hand over to Deputy Provost Baird.
Thank you and good morning, councillors. Can I invite Councillor McDade and Councillor Stewart to move the motion for Team Muirhead Olympic gold medal success? Thank you. Councillor McDade.
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost. I'm delighted to be able to bring this motion to the Council this morning to recognise the significant success of Team Muirhead in winning the Olympic gold medal at the recent Beijing 2022 Winter Olympics. This was the only gold medal, unfortunately, won by our outstanding athletes. However, it was a significant achievement and a real watch for everyone who stayed up to watch it. The Council has opportunities to recognise such success, and we have already done so in some ways, and I thank the Provost for hosting a reception recently for the team at Tours, which I attended and other members of the Council attended, and that was a very positive event. And I think we should go further, given that 2 of the 5 gold medalists are constituents of Perth and Kinross. They grew up here, they trained here, and they are essentially a product of Perth and Kinross, and one that we should be incredibly proud of, I feel. This team achievement is not possible simply just because of sorry, Councillor Lyle. Thank you. This team achievement is not possible purely by those 2 members. However, it is very much a team sport, and therefore, in my view, we should recognise all 5 members of the team by awarding them the Freedom of the City, which is one of the highest honours that we can offer to them. And the motion is quite simple in that I'm asking the Council to resolve to exercise its power under Section 206 of the Local Government Scotland Act 1973 to grant the 5 women of the British women's curling team who took part in the Beijing 2022 Olympics the freedom of the City of Perth to celebrate their gold medal victory. And I think it's important that we note these would be the first women to be recognised by such an honour since 1935, when the former Queen Mother was recognised. And I think it's time that we recognise some of our outstanding women again here in Perth and Kinross with this honour. So I would commend the motion to the Council.
Thank you very much, Councillor McDade. Can I invite Councillor Stewart to second the motion, please?
Thanks very much, Deputy Provost. I'm entirely in agreement with Councillor McDade in the sentiment and detail behind his motion. Nobody who followed, for example, the London 2012 Olympics and the aftermath, the inspiration that that brought and the upsurge in taking part in sport from young people could fail to be inspired again by the success of the Great Britain women's curling team at the Winter Olympics this year. I'm very happy to second the motion, particularly because not only is Ward 2 Strathmore home to the Cooper Angus and Kettins Curling Club, which is one of the oldest established in the world, having been in existence since the mid-1700s, but it is of course home in Gilton to Millie Smith, one of the members of the team. I'm happy to formally second the motion.
Thank you very much, Councillor Stewart. I will now open it up for comments. First comment from Councillor Williamson.
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost. I would like to endorse everything Councillor Stewart and Councillor McDade have just said. I think the achievement of Team Muirhead was very significant, which the whole country has embraced and feels rightly proud of. Eve went to school locally within my ward, and her family still farm locally. She is an inspiration, and she does excel at everything she does, including golf. And I believe she's a sheep shearer, so I don't know whether the accolade of Freedom of Perth allows her to drive the sheep across the bridges yet, but even so, she does excel at everything she does. I think this would be a worthwhile accolade of her achievements in Beijing.
Thank you very much, Councillor Williamson. Councillor Sarwar.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Eve Muirhead is no stranger to winning. She was a 4-time World Junior Champion. As skip of the Scotland team, Eve has won an array of medals at the European and World Championships. In the Sochi Olympics in 2014, she became the youngest ever skip, male or female, to win an Olympic medal. And of course, in Beijing this year, she led the women's Olympic team to gold medal victory. She is an outstanding sportswoman that many of us have long looked up to and been proud to think of as our own. The motion in front of us today not only honours Eve Muirhead, but the whole team. There is power in the collective, in a community, in something greater than its individual parts. Eve, Jennifer, Vicky, Hayley and Millie trained together, played together and supported each other on their road to victory, and it is only fitting that we honour them together. In this, my last appearance before stepping down as councillor for the beautiful Strathmore ward, I would like to give special mention to Millie Smith, whose family are local Gilton residents, whose curling career has seen an impressive and steady incline and I'm sure has many more gold medals ahead of her. The curling Olympic matches were joyous to watch, right up to the nail-biting final, and we can all share a sense of pride in having such strong representation for Scotland and for Perth and Kinross on the international sporting arena. At times, some of the mechanisms we use to bestow honour or even celebration can seem antiquated. And when you think the last woman to receive the freedom of the city was in 1935 and was the Queen Mother, there might be some truth to that. But when we recognise the achievements of St Johnstone, I think we all felt this tradition had been brought into current times and made a little more relevant. Today we have the chance to do something really radical and bestow the freedom of the city honour onto not just one woman, but a whole group of brilliant, dedicated and inspiring sportswomen of gold medal standard. Deputy Provost, I am pleased to support the motion and would encourage my colleagues across the chambers to do the same.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sarwar. Councillor Parrott.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I remember it was a late night. I support the resolution in principle, but I would ask whether the mover and seconder would consider referring specifically to the British Women's Curling Team 2022, because I don't think we're resolving generally it's not the British Women's Curling Team forevermore. And the last sentence, I think it's true in terms of individuals, but I think other women have been recognised as parts of groups, and I would ask them to consider perhaps taking out the last sentence, but I'm not sure that it's accurate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Parrott. Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. The Scottish Liberal Democratic Group fully supports this motion, which is a well-deserved accolade to our fantastic curling team. I'm a keen curler, and I have to say that the skills that were portrayed in these nail-biting events in the Winter Olympics, it just seems superhuman to me. And it's a huge achievement for these young women to have brought such plaudits to both themselves and to Britain. I'm totally impressed. But I think there's a clap in the back should also go to Perth and Kinross Council, because over the years, this council has supported curling, both in our curling rinks at Dewar Centre, but even at Kinross, where it's supported the modernisation of the rink and made it disabled friendly, which is a great thing. So I think curling's got a great future in Perth and Kinross, and all the more so for the huge achievements by our curling team. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Robertson. Councillor Duff.
Thank you. And without doubt, Eve Muirhead's success as a curler in her own right has been phenomenal and unparalleled in the British curling world. I watched the curling semis and the finals, and along with all of us was delighted when the Team GB's rink was successful. I support the word of the freedom of the city to the British women's curling team, and I think, like Councillor Parrott, would agree that women in St Johnstone Football Club and the Territorial Battalion have been recognised with the freedom of the city, and would agree with that comment. But I am very much in support of this award for the British Women's Curling Team 2022. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Duff. Councillor Lyle.
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost. I'll begin again. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'd just like to endorse the comments made previously by colleagues. I think we should all celebrate the achievements of the Beijing curling team and the British Olympic curling team 2022. I'd just like to endorse the comments from Councillor Parrott that I am aware specifically of female members of the TA, and the St Johnstone Football Club is not just a male-only orientated organisation. So I would be happy to agree the motion, and hopefully Councillor McDade agreeable to accommodate Councillor Parrott's comment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Duff. Councillor Lane.
Thanks very much, Deputy Provost. Just to continue support for this motion, I'm glad it's been brought at the past council, and I thank the Mover and Seconder for bringing it, because if they hadn't brought it, this chance to praise and celebrate the victory would have been lost, and I think it would have been remiss if the council hadn't brought this suggestion forward. So thanks to them for doing that. Being a maid curler myself, I do know the skills that are involved with it. Unfortunately, I don't have anything near the skill that these people have. Everyone in the team is very important. The person sweeping the stones is important as the person that delivers it. It's a fantastic achievement for all five who work together to achieve this award. Another unfortunate thing which we may concentrate as a council, and hopefully our climate change agenda will have impact as much as we can have. I've never managed to play in the Grand Match. I've never seen one in recent lifetime where everybody, all the teams from Scotland played outdoors on a loch, and hopefully we can get back to that someday. I might not see it, but unless we start working now, none of us will see it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for these comments, Councillor Lane. I cannot miss this opportunity to say that maybe and I'm not sure if Councillor Robertson played in the Grand Match, and I too am a maid curler, so I know all about curling, and maybe in my retirement I can go back. I've already I was a member of Abdi Ladies, so I too am proud of what Eve and her team have achieved. And as we speak, Eve is in Geneva at the moment playing in the mixed doubles, so we hope she will continue on her success. I don't see anyone else wishing to make any comment. Councillor McDade.
Just to sum up then. Thank you very much, Deputy Provost. I'd like to thank Councillor Stewart, Williamson, Sarwar, Parrott, Robertson, Duff, Lyle and Lane for their contributions, and actually I think it has shown the breadth of interest, knowledge, experience across the chamber on this subject, and indeed to you, Deputy Provost, and I look forward to coming and watching one of your matches in your retirement from the council. I'm very happy to incorporate Councillor Parrott's proposed tweaks, and I think it's a great opportunity for us to reflect on the successes of our young people and their achievements, and that they have put a very good image for Perth and Kinross, not just here locally, to inspire young people here to take up the sport, but across the country and the wider world, of course. So I would just like to commend the motion that Eve Muirhead, Vicky Wright, Jennifer Dodds, Hayley Duff and Millie Smith be awarded the Freedom of the City.
Thank you very much, Councillor McDade. The motion is agreed. Thank you. I will now hand back to the Provost. Oh, sorry, Councillor Stewart.
No, I've just put it in the chat. I didn't think it was worth coming back in, but happy to complete the points.
Thank you very much. Now hand back to the Provost.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. We'll now move on to item 5, update on the Tay-Cities regional deal and first annual report. Can I ask David Littlejohn, Head of Planning and Development, to introduce the report?
Thank you, Provost. It's actually Alison Seggy who's going to introduce the report today. She was the principal author.
Okay, thank you.
I think maybe muted, Alison.
Apologies, I was so keen to get going. Bear with me. Welcome. Morning, councillors. This report provides an update on progress with the Tay-Cities region deal, which was finally signed off on the 17th of December 2020. It specifically focuses on those projects directly benefiting the Perth and Kinross area and highlights the key project updates from the deal's first annual report published in February of this year. The deal is a combined investment of £300 million from the Scottish and UK governments over a 10-year period from 2021 to 2031. The deal, which comprises 24 individual named projects and 2 programmes, one for skills and employability and one for tourism and culture, will support business growth, the development of new innovative technologies, enhancements to business productivity, the development of skills within the local population, and ultimately the creation of jobs within the regional economy. The investment is expected to lever a further £400 million and create or sustain over 6,000 jobs. A joint committee has been established, which currently has 3 Perth and Kinross Council elected members on it, Councillors Lyle, Lane and Stewart. In addition, Councillor Parrott is a non-voting co-opted member representing TACTRAN. Significant progress has been made with a number of Perth and Kinross Council-led projects included within the deal. The Perth Cultural Transformation Project, known more widely as Perth City Hall, is well underway and has already drawn down its full £10 million of grant award. The local full fibre network project, part of the Perth and Kinross and Angus Rural Digital Project, has now completed its build phase and has claimed 99% of its £1 million funding. Another council project, the Low Carbon Transport and Active Travel Hub, is timetabled to be considered at the June Joint Committee, with implementation to follow shortly after. 10 further projects are based within Perth and Kinross and are at various stages of development and implementation. The most significant of these are the 2 projects led by the James Hutton Institute, with a combined grant award of some £62 million. These projects are the Integrated Barley Hub and the Advanced Plant Growth Centre. Both projects are now progressing and underway on site. Of the others, the next most progressed is the Pitlochry Festival Theatre redevelopment, which received its outline business case sign-off at the March Management Group meeting. It is planning to submit its full business case by the end of the calendar year. In addition to the projects and programmes in the main deal, an additional £50 million side deal was approved by the Scottish Government, and 40 million of that will contribute to the costs of the new Cross-Tay Link Road, with the first tranche of funding currently being claimed. The Tay Cities region deal is the most significant investment in the economic development of the area in recent years, and I believe that the projects, when delivered, will make a very positive contribution to our economic growth. I'm very happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Members, are there any questions on this report? I have one or two already. Councillor Lane. Councillor Lane.
Thanks, Provost, and thanks for the report, Alison. And we're fortunate enough we can see one of the projects very close at hand when we're walking into 2 High Street. So it's good to see moving forward, and all these projects are obviously worthwhile. Alison, can you just give us all an idea of how these projects are going to be affected by construction inflation and fuel costs, etc., and what is the mechanism and who will fall if the budget becomes insufficient to complete the projects? Where does the extra funding come from?
Thanks for the question, Councillor Lyles. It's a very important one. It is one that the TCT deal partners are looking at. However, there is no additional funding available from the governments. They have made that clear. It is something that all projects are having to look at very carefully and redesign projects to fit within their window of funding or to attract further additional funding from external sources. There is no magic pot of additional funding available, certainly at the moment.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Barrett, please.
Thanks, Provost. Ms Nagy referred to the low carbon transport and active travel hubs in her introduction to the paper. I noted in the table in paragraph 5.1 there is comments regarding the project going to the Joint Committee in June if comments from the Scottish Government are resolved. Are there any particular thorny issues to resolve or which are unlikely to be resolved in time for that project to get its approval? And can she give us some additional information as to what phase 1 of the project comprises? Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Barrett. The low carbon hub has indeed received a number of comments. All business cases go through a fairly detailed and quite lengthy process to the approval point and go back and forward to both governments with a series of questions. We're currently just working through and have resubmitted the full business case with our responses to the questions received. Most of them are fairly minor and fairly technical, and we're very assured that these will be accepted and will be pushed through. There's certainly an element of timescale around this one with the ERDF being used as match funding, so it's quite time critical that we get this one through at the June Joint Committee. In terms of what the project comprises of, it's part 1 is mainly the development at the Brock Sten Park and Ride, which is looking at developing a whole series of electric vehicle chargers, electric bike chargers, and a solar panel to produce some energy. So they're the solar carport canopies with a battery storage system, and that will generate on-site renewable energy. There are going to be 7 additional rapid charging stations, including 1 with full disabled access, and 8 further EV stations, so that's 15 in total, 2 e-bike chargers and secure bike storage, and 40 of the solar carports that will generate on-site electricity. So that's the main elements of that phase 1 project.
Thanks very much for that. It's obviously a significant enhancement to EV support in infrastructure in Perth and Kinross. How much is, or what is the value of the ERDF funding that we want to ensure we utilise?
The ERDF match funding is some 424,000 and the Tay Cities funding is 636,000. That's
Thanks very
total
much.
cost.
Total cost about £1 million. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Can I call on Councillor Parrott, please?
Thank you, Provost. I note the comments by Alison Seggy with regard to how advanced the business case is for Pitlochry Festival Theatre, but I note equally that's programmed for years 6 to 10. Taking into account the very relevant points raised by Councillor Lane with regard to construction cost inflation, if the Pitlochry Festival Theatre project is ready to go, might there be the opportunity to move it forward earlier than years 6 to 10? And if I may, a supplementary, the Perth Bus and Rail interchange is now slated for years 7 to 10. That, to my mind, is a slight slippage from what I originally thought it would be. Can you confirm that that is the case, and if so, for what reason? Thank you.
Thanks for those questions, Councillor Parrott. Yes, in terms of the Pitlochry Festival Theatre project, they are proceeding ahead of schedule. It will be down to the Joint Committee to agree any advancement of funds. It has happened for a couple of projects, however, there's no guarantees. However, I would say that Pitlochry has significant amounts of private sector investment and charitable funding and private donations. They've already done significant amounts of fundraising, and they've actually already completed some elements of the project at their own risk. So there is the possibility that they will be able to advance funding, but that's not guaranteed. However, a number of the projects are looking at actually carrying out the projects in advance and drawing down the money when they can draw it down later in the programme, or requesting an advancement of funds. But those advancements of funds have to be agreed and approved, and it depends on the full financial envelope for any 1 year and what is coming forward. So it's quite a tricky negotiation, but it is possible, and it's something that they're working towards in terms of Pitlochry. So that is positive and good news. In terms of your query about the Perth Bus and Rail Interchange project, that was where it fell in terms of the agreed profile when the deal was signed off 2 years ago. So nothing has particularly changed, and we know that that's a fairly long-term project, and we're still working on a lot of the feasibility work in terms of what that project will look like in terms of its scope. So I don't think we're particularly concerned about where it sits in the programme, as that was where it was profiled when the deal was agreed 2 years ago.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can I call on Councillor Stewart, please?
Thanks, Provost. Just with cognizance of the rising construction inflation costs, I wonder if I could ask about the any inflationary increase associated with the overall Cross Bay Link Road project outlined in 6.1. I know that the project board met earlier in the month to get the updated costs, but when we were asking it, when I was asking it Strategic Policy and Resources Committee last week, the Head of Economic Development and Planning wasn't available to answer that question, but get an update today.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. As I said earlier, the position at the moment is that there are no additional funds coming forward from either UK or Scottish Government, and that projects will have to work within their funding envelope as agreed in the full deal as published. So unfortunately there is at the moment no compensation for inflationary increases, and projects will have to handle that themselves and work that through their own additional funding requirements.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to understand what the actual figure for that envelope now is.
Well, it's the 40 million that was agreed within the 50 million additional side deal. So I think it was 40 million that was allocated to the cross-tier link road that's
Yes,
outlined in the report. Sorry, I may be misunderstanding the question, Councillor Stewart.
Alison, David Littlejohn would like to come in.
Yeah, I think there are two aspects. Obviously, this report today is considering the TACIT's deal, and obviously that 40 million contribution from Transport Scotland is secure. In relation, I think, to the question you're asking, Councillor Stewart, about the wider cost of the Cost Tail Link Road, at present the envelope is the envelope that was agreed by Council, and that's the envelope that officers are working to. Clearly, as the project progresses, through the first stage, there have been some changes, there have been some additional costs, there have been some expenditures, some reductions in expenditure, there's been some value engineering. We're not quite yet at the position of producing that kind of final best estimate for the delivery of the project, but that will be reported to SP&R as soon as we have that financial information in a form that we are satisfied with.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Stewart?
I don't think it does. And I know that the project board met earlier in the month and they were due to get an update on construction inflation costs related to the project. So I'd like to know what that figure is.
Well, again, I'm now chair the project board, Councillor Stewart. So we had some indications from BAM Nuttall about the likelihood that there would be some construction cost pressures, but those are likely to be offset, or to an extent we hope they can be offset by the value engineering work that's being looked at and costed out just now. So we got a kind of heads up, which is not a surprise, that there is construction cost inflation, but there has also been some work being done which is currently being costed in relation to what can be done to ensure that as much as we can the project remains within the council's approved budget ceiling, and should that change, that would be reported to SP&R.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I now call on Councillor Simpson, please?
Thank you very much indeed, Provost. Colleagues will be pleased to hear it's not my intention to bang on about the CTLR today, but my question it refers to an item on page 56 regarding the Perth bus and rail interchange. And I'd like a little bit more information on that. I well remember the first presentation I ever went to 19 years ago when I was first elected was about this very matter, and pretty much hee-haw has happened in the intervening 19 years. And I just wondered if we could get a little more information about how Network Rail and the other partners are working together. It's my understanding that the failure of working together is caused delay.
Thanks for the question, Councillor Simpson. I think I'll bat this one back to David Littlejohn, who's closer to the project than I am. David, can you answer this one?
Yeah, thanks, Alison. Thanks for the question, Councillor Simpson. Yes, I mean, I'm as equally frustrated as you. I think I've been in discussions about Perth Station for my 10 years in Perth and Kinross Council. However, the project is now moving forward. Network Rail is leading on the production of the master plan, which incorporates the multimodal hub, the integrated bus rail project that's City Deal funded. So the master plan process has started. There's a project board been set up, which I sit on to represent officers at Perth and Kinross Council, alongside ScotRail, Transport Scotland, and Historic Environment Scotland, given the significant heritage asset that is Perth Station. So the board's up and running. The master plan is underway, and we will report back to council, what I think will be a good news story in due course when that work completes. Hope that gives you some assurance.
Okay, thank you very much. Is you happy with that, Councillor?
To use it before I die, Provost.
Right, can I now call on Councillor Ahern, please? Sorry, Liz Barrett.
Thank you, Provost. And thank you to Alison Seggy and the Planning and Development team for this report. It's very wide-ranging and very useful to know what's happening. Looking at section 4.3.2 on page 55 about the high-speed broadband, and it refers to the full fibre connections. This also comes up under the economic wellbeing plan in our next paper. We've had the issue before that things have been connected, but they haven't been live. Please, can you confirm what the status of these connections is? Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Barrett. Yes, we are actually at the moment currently, I think the phrase is lighting up the various connections. That process is not complete. It has just started, and I think it will go on for another few months. IT colleagues are more involved in that than myself, but certainly I'm involved on the project board, and that's the stage we're at in terms of the physical build has happened, in terms of trenches dug and connections made, but in terms of lighting up and going live, that process is still underway and will be for several months to come.
Thank you. Okay. That's a bit disappointing, and I hope it can, as we all know, high-speed broadband is just so important in these areas, so I hope we can get through it as quickly as we can. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I ask call on Councillor Ahern, please?
Thank you, Provost. My question's on the table on page 55, and it's the Aviation Academy. And I note there that there was a change of management on the Dundee site, which has caused delays. Can I ask if these delays have been resolved, and is this change in management likely to affect the project on the Perth site?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Ahern. Yes, it's in relation to Tayside Aviation, the company that's based at the Dundee Airport end of the site, and what the building proposed was for them. Tayside Aviation have been bought out by the Balhousie Group, so it's in some ways a technical issue. So we are just liaising with the new owners of the Tayside Aviation company. We actually think in the longer term it will be positive, because they are very supportive of the project at the Dundee end. What we're trying to do is unpick the project slightly so that we can advance the works at Perth in advance of the Dundee project being scoped out and agreed with the new owners. So what we're trying to do is, at the moment it's one project going through a project approval. What we're trying to get approval for is taking the Perth element and moving it forward at pace, so that the Dundee discussions don't delay the Perth project. That is still being sort of unpicked and worked through, but we're certainly hopeful that will be resolved in the next couple of months.
I'll just ask a supplementary then, if that's the case, is the Perth site plan already developed, and are we likely to be able to get that to start before the proposed 3 to 7 year start date on that?
It depends if funding becomes available. I think we have already said that there will be no funding on site this year. I think it was due to come on stream actually this year, but it's year 3 of the overall programme. And I think due to the delays, we've said it will not be until year 4 that one will come forward. But we're certainly hopeful that there will be some start to the project next financial year.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lang, you would like another question?
Thanks, Provost, but out of courtesy and protocol, I don't think Councillor Wilson's asked a question, so I'm quite happy to defer to him and come in after him. I've asked a question already.
Thank you, Councillor Lang. Councillor Wilson, please.
Thank you, Provost. First of all, I'd like to second the motion by Councillor Simpson regarding life expectancy, if I may. But I return to the bus and rail interchange. Lewis Simpson's only had about 10 or 20 years of it. I think I've had nearly a lot longer, but we'll come to that later. However, there's a serious point that this has been an on and off project, not because of the endeavour of our officers or our politicians in Perth and Kinross to see things done. I don't know whether Alison or David will want to answer this or not, but every time we seem to make progress, Network Rail throw a sleeper across the line, if I can use that metaphor. And are we now engaging with Network Rail, and particularly are they engaging in the electrification services of the railways to Glasgow and Edinburgh, as well as the travel hub. Is that part of the deal, or is it not? If they know.
It's part of the master plan, Councillor Wilson. So it is, and I'm not going to make excuses for Network Rail or ScotRail, but what they're trying to do is reconcile the engineering requirements for electrification, which will require some bridge height uplifts, and there's a technical challenge at the Moncrief tunnel. They're trying to reconcile, and there's a signalling constraint at Perth station. So they're trying to reconcile the engineering requirements, which has got a significant cost, and you're into tens and tens of millions, with the actual station infrastructure, which is larger than is now required for passenger volumes. So you've got a kind of complexity of trying to get the engineering sorted out first, and the cost and the funding for that, along with the future use of some of the buildings, which are listed, and in that mix is the bus and interchange, the bus rail interchange. Until they get the first two items kind of sorted out, they can't really move to sort out a much better interface with bus users. So it is complex, and it has taken an awful lot longer than any of us would want. But I do feel now the right people are sitting around the table. I think it's also helpful that the steering group, the board for the master plan, is being chaired by Transport Scotland. So if you like, the ringmaster is now chairing the process and is actually driving it forward quite aggressively. So I think we will see much more significant movement we have done for whether it's multi years up until now.
Thank you very much indeed for that encouraging reply.
Thank you. Councillor Ling, you still got a question?
Yes, thanks, Provost. I'm following on from my original question and then Councillor Stewart's question. It's really where the exposure to the council is in this. So all these projects, if they do not fall within their envelope, the Crosstay Road Link, we're a major partner in the funding for that. We can't just stop at 10 feet short of being completion if it goes over its budget. So even a 7.5% increase in the cost of that was budgeted at, I think, 110 million. There's another 7.5 million for the council. I was wondering if we know the totality of what the council could be fit. If there's no money coming from the government, the council itself could be landed with these capital projects if the construction inflation continues as it is, because some of these projects are 10 years out. The budget's been set. I don't know what the inflation built into that, these sums that have been awarded is. So I'm looking if David has any idea of where the contingency and how much the council could be, future councils could be faced with to complete these projects.
Thanks for the question. And there's no, other than the projects which the council is the recipient of the grant, Perth City Hall, the council has no legal liability to meet any of the shortfall of third-party projects. They have independently are in receipt of grant from the UK and Scottish governments, and it would be for those individual partners to try to negotiate either an increase in grant, or, as Alison was saying, secure grant from another source, or to cut their own cloths accordingly. But there's no expectation or incumbency on this or any of the other councils to step in and meet the shortfall. It's a choice if there are particular projects that the council is minded to support, but there's no there'd be no obligation.
Does that include the Crosstay Road Link?
The Crosstay Road Link is our own project, so in the eventuality that that has an increased cost, that would be a matter for the council to consider. But like all these projects, we are making some speculation about construction inflation. It's increasing just now. We don't know where it will go in the long term, and that's the challenge we've got, and all the project owners have, is trying to understand and make some assumptions about actually material availability as much as construction costs. But That's why it's taken a wee bit of time for particularly the CTLR to bottom out where we are and what could be done to ensure that we can retain the project within the approved budget ceiling, if at all possible. But we're not there yet. So I think there is a degree of speculation at the moment and assumptions that everyone is having to kind of get their heads around.
Okay for that. Thank you. Are there any more questions on this important paper before we move on? No. Councillor Lyle, can I ask you to move the report?
Thank you very much, Provost. Before I move the report, I'd just like to say thank you to Alison Seggie for all her hard work on this project and for answering the questions this morning. And further, I'd like to thank David Littlejohn for his past 6-7 years of dedicated work in bringing the Tay City deal forward and for the continuing work he does with it. I'm aware that he has been instrumental in bringing forward these projects on behalf of Perth and Kinross and indeed on behalf of well. Thank you, Provost. This report provides an update on the progress with the Tay Cities region deal. The deal was approved in December 2020 and has now moved into its 10th year implementation phase. The deal and the projects and the programmes within the deal represent the most significant investment in economic development in our area in recent time. Excellent progress is being made and a number of key projects which will deliver significant economic benefits are already underway within Perth and Kinross and the wider Tay Cities region. It is further recommended that each year a progress report is submitted to this council, and I'm happy to move the paper. Thank you, Provost.
Okay, now, Councillor Duff, please.
Sorry, Provost, Councillor Duff, I think you've joined the meeting virtually, which will then cause confusion with the cameras in the chambers. If you can leave the meeting and then we'll pick you up from your microphone.
Thank you. Okay, the substantial progress which has been made during the first year of the Tay Cities deal is extremely good to note. Between the Tay Cities deal funding and the additional monies it can leverage in, it is expected to be worth in the region of £700 million to the Tay Cities region and to create more than 6,000 jobs. The Tay Cities deal is therefore a major game changer for Perth and Kinross and the wider Tay Cities region. I'm also pleased to note that 3 of the 4 Perth and Kinross Council projects have made substantial progress in the first year, especially the Perth City Hall cultural venue, which will entice an estimated 300,000 visitors to the city. Great news for our city centre trade and accommodation providers. Also the implementation of the 1 gigabit full fibre high-speed broadband network across the city of Perth and the rural Perth and Kinross, which will help to bring about further developments in due course. Provost, as members can see, good progress is being made on the projects which make up the Tay Cities deal, and I'm delighted to second the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. We'll now move on to comments, and we have first one is Peter Barrett, please.
Thank you, Provost. I think it's a small project in the wider scheme of things. In terms of value, it's only £1 million out of what Councillor Duff just told us was a £700 million programme. But I think the low carbon transport project and phase 1 of that project is something that residents of Perth and Kinross and visitors to Perth and Kinross are very much looking forward to seeing implemented, in the enhancement of EV charging facilities in Perth City Centre and at the edge of Perth City Centre. It was certainly something that came up at the town hall meeting that I and my ward colleagues attended last night, a meeting that was hosted by the Bridgend, Gannicky and Canoe Community Council, the North Inch and Muirton Community Council and the North Muirton Community Council, and certainly there was a desire amongst the people who attended that to see EV infrastructure improved in Perth and Kinross, and also the reliability of that infrastructure improved. So I'm particularly pleased to see that 7 out of the 7 rapid EV charging station, 1 is going to be disabled, providing disabled access. And that there is EV bike chargers included in that as well, which will help with sustainable active travel. I'm particularly pleased to see the 40 solar car parks, which will ensure that the EV charging is going to come from a sustainable energy source for the project, and I very much welcome that, in addition to the 10 EV chargers that are going to be installed in the city centre at Riverside and Victoria Street car parks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Can I call on Councillor Parrott, please?
Thank you very much, Provost. I was happy to be and delighted to be inside the City Hall with 2 councillor colleagues last Friday afternoon, and I can confirm that the project is well underway and a lot is happening inside the building. The project really is taking shape, and I say that partly because many people have said to me, but nothing seems to be happening. Nearly all of it's going on inside the building, and it is happening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. That's very assuring news, I'm sure, for everybody. Councillor Wilson, please.
Provost, thanks very much indeed. I'd like to commend, first of all, the report and the authors of it, and also the crisp, detailed and professional answers we've had from our officers this morning. That's very much appreciated.
Sorry to interrupt, Councillor Wilson. I think, like Councillor Ahern, there may be complications with the technology because I think you've joined the virtual meeting. So if you leave the Teams meeting and then continue your comment through your microphone.
Every day is a new challenge for me with this IT stuff. I'm on page 53 and the International Barley Hub and Advanced Plant Growth Centre at Milnfield. I think this is one of the most tremendous developments we could possibly have within our council area, Provost. And for the international work that's done there, that's recognised throughout the world, it's a great sense of pride that we have that and it's proceeding as well as planned. The Perth City Hall project is one that I need to confess. I did at one point in my political career think that we should have taken the building down. I'm now on the road to Damascus and I've seen the light, Provost, and I think the scheme that's there is very much welcome and will create a great deal of vibrancy and life to our city centre. And yes, you famously can't make any omelettes without breaking some eggs, but they're making progress on the outside of the building, and I'm pleased to associate myself with Councillor Parrott's remarks that they're making huge progress inside as well. And there have been recent very good publicity in national newspapers on the scheme. I think I won't say any more about the rail project, except to thank David Littlejohn for his helpful and I hope good remarks that Transport Scotland are to take this forward. It's sadly needed. Finally, 2 things. I'd like to associate myself with Peter Barrett's remarks about the low carbon transport and active travel hub at Broxden. I've been involved in this project for many years now, and it's taken a while to come to this fruition, but it's great to see it going ahead. And finally, good luck to Pitlochry Theatre. Yes, I'd like to see the programme accelerated, but they've done tremendous work there, and one place I will look forward to visiting more often in the future. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor. There are no more comments. Can we agree the report? Thank you. I'll now pass on to Deputy Provost to take item 6 on the agenda.
Thank you very much, Provost. We now have item 6 on the agenda, the Economic Wellbeing Plan Progress Report. And can I invite Alison Seggy, Service Manager, to introduce the report, please? Having a busy day, Alison.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. This report provides an update on the delivery of actions within the Economic Wellbeing Plan, which was approved by this committee in March of last year. The plan was developed in partnership with the Economic Wellbeing Task Force, comprised of a number of key partners and stakeholders, and established in the wake of the onset of the COVID pandemic to support our economic recovery. Good progress has been made to date, with over a third of all actions on target and delivering positive outcomes for local businesses and individuals. Additional funding was secured through this year's budget to further support the plan. Over the last 2 years, we have processed and paid £85 million to more than 7,000 businesses on behalf of the Scottish Government by way of COVID recovery grants. The Economic Wellbeing Task Force continues to meet to review progress on the plan and to discuss further potential joint projects and improvement actions. The plan focuses on 3 broad action areas: people, business and place, and on short, medium and longer term actions designed to support the growth of our economy, with the longer term projects focused on the decarbonisation and digitisation of our economy. Key successes to date include supporting 128 people into work via our various recruitment incentives for businesses, supporting over 215 new business startups in the last year, supporting over 51 restaurants and cafes to occupy public space to allow them to expand their occupancy during COVID, providing funding to property owners to bring back 45 properties into use for either residential or commercial, and secured external funding to develop significant new visitor facilities at Aberfeldy, Grantley and at Lochleven. The plan has made good progress in its first year of implementation. It is intended to be a live and flexible plan to be kept under constant review and be agile enough to respond to the new National Strategy for Economic Transformation and to any future challenges faced by the local labour market and businesses. I'm very happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alison. I now invite Councillor Robertson for the first question. Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. This is indeed a very important report and made, I think, excellent reading. Can I ask about 4.1 and the challenges that are highlighted there? Late notification of Scottish Government employability grant support is one of them. What was the reason for that?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Robertson. We have been struggling to, I wouldn't say engage with Scottish Government. There's been significant amounts of additional funding being brought forward by Scottish Government for employability support. However, some of that has been brought to us late in the year. I think last year our grant award was not made until something like September, October in the year that we were to spend the money. So it's been quite challenging to then implement that. We also had to re-establish a local employability partnership, which has an oversight of that funding. So it's through no fault of our own. As I say, we've been working through Slade and with other local authorities to try and ensure that we get our grant offer letters in due time to allow us to plan for our activities for this year. It was slightly better. We got our grant offer letter for this year, I think, in the second or third week of March, but it certainly doesn't give us an awful lot of time to plan and work through what our priorities might be for the coming year. So it's an ongoing challenge, and it's something all local authorities are taking up via COSLA and via Slade, that this is an ongoing challenge for us in terms of being able to make proper plans and to allow us to commission additional activity, because we do have some fairly substantial funding now coming in through the door for what they're calling No One Left Behind and Young Persons Guarantee, mainly in terms of that funding for employability support. We are trying to make as good use of that as we can, and you will see in the plan some good outcomes, but it has been challenging in terms of some of the timescales.
Thanks for that reply. I hope that Councillor Lang, for example, will be listening to your reply and rattling some cages in the powers that be in Holyrood to get these things sorted, because we can't do the important work we are doing unless we get grants timelessly coming from the Scottish Government. So I think that's a point that should be made to them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Robertson. Councillor Donaldson, next question, please.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Can I just note the 85 million that has been received in grants from the Scottish Government, and that's gone to more than to around 7,000 businesses locally. Can I also note the 1.14 million of non-recurring expenditure to support further economic recovery that's been provided by the Council for 2022-23. Now, this came up at Strategic Policy and Resources last week, but can a Council Officer, Alison Seggy, in this very good report, confirm exactly how much we have still remaining on the COVID-19 earmarked reserve? And then I'll have a supplementary.
David, can you answer that one, or maybe Stuart? It's not something I'm particularly close to. I think you're on mute, David.
I think it's a question for Stuart, actually.
Good morning, councillors, and I'll repeat the answer I gave at SPNR committee last week, in excess of £8 million.
Could I then just ask a supplementary with that 8 million? It is an earmarked reserve, but can I ask Stuart, there have been a couple of drawdowns and no one objected to them in relation to additional support for young people, also for training standards. But with the criteria, with the funding for COVID recovery funds, just what constraints are placed on that, and can that fund be just carried forward indefinitely? But the point is, it cannot be, I would have thought, used as just a general reserve to cover other areas.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Dawson. I can just perhaps remind elected members that when Council approved the COVID earmark reserve, the focus of the fund was very much around providing additional support, either to the Council or partner bodies, or indeed external organisations, in terms of their response to COVID. And that could include economic recovery as part of that more broadly. In terms of the use of the earmark reserve, that is of course a matter for Council to determine, but there's no time scale or no time limit on that. We can carry the money forward as Council determines from year to year.
Okay, so we're sitting on 8 million, which could be a chunk of it used now. Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much. Next question is from Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Sorry, I was fighting with my mute button there for a second. My question relates to section 4.1 in the report, which is the People Actions Review for 2021. Under key successes there, we have numbers for the numbers of people who benefited from each of those programmes for most of the sub-bullets. But for the sub-bullets 5 to 8, so that's the HGV driving, the digital skills, the hospitality and the STEM and green skills, there's no numbers accompanying those ones. I wondered if officers know how many people have benefited from those programmes or those routes into work, or if that might be able to be shared with us as a follow-up, if it was maybe just an omission from the report today. Thank you.
Thank you. Alison.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Bailey. I think it was omitted because we're still in the process of those academies are actually still underway. I know for the HGV one, I think there was something like a dozen, there tends to be about a dozen people on each academy. One person has already gone into work and we're monitoring the outcome of the success. I think we've got a waiting list for the HGV, LGV one. That's proved to be very popular. The digital and the STEM ones are still underway and they are being operated for us by Perth College. So we can provide an update at some point over the next month or two. As I say, I think there's still ongoing courses. The hospitality one we have actually had to postpone for now due to lack of interest, which is very unfortunate. So we're hoping to either run something this financial year or look to review and maybe do some further HGV, LGV ones So that's all under review by the Local Employability Partnership in terms of provision for 22-23, but we can certainly provide you an update in the near future in terms of those current courses.
Thank you. And do people come out of those courses, for example, the LGV and HGV one, with the relevant driving licence entitlement, or are these more preparatory courses that set people up for taking the appropriate formal qualification?
No, they come out with the formal qualification. It's a
Great.
kind of condensed course, so it's proving very popular.
Great news. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Councillor Simpson.
Thank you very much indeed, Deputy Provost. We're getting our money's worth out of Alison Seggy today. I have another wee question for a chat, perhaps some clarification on point B2 on page 77. Mentions buy local, eat local and do business local. And I just wondered if we've taken any cognizance of the work done by the organisation Living Streets, which produced an excellent document a few years ago, which demonstrated the value of the pedestrian pound. We all know that pedestrians, whether they come by bus or by bike, spend far more per head than motorists who have a tendency to drive off somewhere else. I just wondered if we're taking any cognizance of these fact-based international studies whereby we promote our town centres and our village centres as well as the city centre as a good place for pedestrians to stay and spend money. That will reap benefits there rather than perhaps being seen as sucking up shamelessly to motorists, which normally happen.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Simpson. I'm not aware of the detail. This is one that's led by my colleague John McCrone, but I'm sure it is something that we are keeping a close eye on. We've spent quite a lot of money on marketing local produce, local cafes, and certainly since John's team also look at the sustainable transport and travel elements through the Sustrans project, I'm sure that we're also keen in terms of developing that whole walk-in, cycle-in catchment. I can take it offline and check if we are aware of the Living Streets work and pass that on to Mr. McCrone.
I can probably answer, Alison. I mean, yes, we are, and Living Streets did form a significant input to the Perth People Place project, Councillor Simpson. So we're absolutely aware of the data and the pound generated, additional poundage generated by walking and cycling. Dwell times in town centres is demonstrably higher for people who ride by foot or wheel.
Thank you very much. Next question is from Councillor Williamson.
Thank you, Provost. I believe Councillor McDade has raised a point of concern, I think, in the chat. I don't know if you want to address that before me.
Councillor Williamson, I think if Councillor Leing wished to raise a concern, that Councillor Leing would have raised it himself. And he has not indicated that he wishes to raise anything. So I've taken the decision just to keep that a bit to the side, and Councillor Leing can raise it when he speaks. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Vice Convener. Right, my question is about the Rural Tourism Fund, and I understand from the paper that we've generated £900,000 from that Rural Tourism Fund. I was wondering if officers could provide us with some comparator data about how well we're doing in drawing down this fund in comparison to other local authorities which have tourism hotspots.
I don't have the detail to that at hand, I'm afraid, Councillor Williamson, but I'm sure we can provide that to you unless David has any indication.
Not at the tip of my tongue, Councillor Williamson, but we definitely can provide that later.
I think we have done fairly well. My sense is that we've done, fairly well out of the fund in terms of the bids we've made to date, but we can check that in terms of comparative data.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McEwen.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I have two questions, so you can come back to me for my second one. In Appendix 1, PE7, Positive Futures, it's detailed there that PCAVs is still providing the service, but welfare rights is needed to withdraw. What was the reason for welfare rights needing to withdraw from this project?
I think it was I'm not sure if it was a capacity issue, but I think they felt that they wanted to prioritise elsewhere. I can't really speak for them myself. I could maybe get more detail, but certainly the ESF funding has been in 2 phases, and they were certainly involved in phase 1, but they took the decision not to continue into phase 2. I would need to seek further clarification on exactly why. I'm not particularly close to that one. Sorry, Councillor McEwen, but we could seek a response and come back to you.
Yes, I'd be very interested in that response. We obviously, as a council, fund the welfare rights team, and if they're short and need extra capacity, then I think the onus is on us as councillors and in this economic times to help them as best we can. Thank you.
Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Provost. I may have 2 questions, but I'll start with the first one. In recommendation 2.1D, the Economic Wellbeing Task Force is to continue to seek external funding wherever possible, which is great, or redirect existing resources to help fund any new actions required. Can I get clarity around what that actually means? Can that happen without elected member approval?
I think my understanding of that was to look at what existing resources we're using in terms of activity, and to look to see if there was that activity was still value in terms of producing outcomes, and then that would be reviewed in terms of redirecting resources. David, do you want to come in any further there?
Yeah, it's making the point, Councillor Stewart, that the members of the Economic Wellbeing Task Force themselves have resources that they could choose to redeploy, whether that's Scottish Enterprise or Skills Development Scotland or the Chamber of Commerce or any of the other partners. It's not just down to the council to fund the economic wellbeing plan, and it's not just down to the council to seek to redirect resources. It's much wider than that. Hence, it's a discussion with the task force members. So apologies if that wasn't clear in the recommendation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Liz Barrett.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. My question follows on from Councillor McEwen's relating to page 74 and PE7 about ESF positive futures. Can I just say in passing a plea again, please could you do a summary of acronyms? Actually ESF, there is no definition of it, and I'm assuming that it's not the European Social Fund, it's the Education and Skills Funding?
No, it is actually the European Social Fund, and apologies for that, Liz. I did mean to add.
Yeah, it could have been, it could have been either. Sorry, yeah, I didn't pick up when you said that earlier. But it's really my concern is, Councillor McEwen's already raised concern about PKC welfare rights, about the Citizens Advice Bureau having enough resource to look after this if welfare rights have withdrawn, because this is very important. What we're aiming at, supporting lone parents, workless households, low income households with benefit checks, and making sure they're getting all the support they can. So my concern is, does the CAB have the resources to keep this going, or how can we get this out of amber and into green? And just related to that, on page at the beginning, on page 66 in 5.4, we talk about the economic activity and unemployment. I wondered if in future we could have inclusion of information about levels of poverty, and particularly child poverty, because that has a key impact on the economic situation in Perth and Kinross. Thank you.
Thanks for the questions, Councillor Barrett. I can certainly confirm that the CAB project is continuing well. Obviously, during COVID, there were some impacts in terms of accessing and supporting clients, but we're working through those and they're now back on track. I think that project was rated amber just because initially when we put in the European Social Fund application, it was based on a number of outcomes, and with welfare rights withdrawing, obviously we aren't able to deliver all those outcomes we'd originally promised. So that's why it's at amber. So, but in terms of your query about poverty, yes, you're right. It's something that's very important. We are involved in the poverty work stream with colleagues in housing, and we're well linked in there. Yes, we possibly should have included some comments on that. We were trying to keep the report as concise as possible, and it already was a fairly lengthy report. So there is quite a lot of detail around the impact on unemployment and poverty, and we're hoping to do some sort of economic bulletin shortly, so we can include some detail in that, and that will be circulated to elected members.
Thank you. And a list of acronyms, please, in reports.
Apologies.
Thank you. Councillor Drysdale.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. And first of all, can I share Councillor Liz Barrett's desire for a list of acronyms? That would be very helpful indeed. I'm at Appendix 1B20 on Accelerate Housing Investment, and I'm very pleased, naturally, to note the green RAG status on acceleration of delivery of our affordable housing programme with over 300 completions. I'm aware, obviously, of the national targets led by the Scottish Government for, I think, 105,000 houses nationally, and an ambitious target of a further 110,000 more affordable homes in the next 10 years, 70% of them for social rent. I guess my question is, where does Perth and Kinross sit nationally in terms of progress on this extremely important issue? Are we mid-table? Are we in the promotion playoffs? Where are we?
I think that might be one for David. David, can you answer that one?
I don't have the information to hand, but I can. We can provide that information to you. It's a good question. I just don't know I don't have that data with me.
If I can just press slightly, I mean, it's a green RAG status, so I'm kind of hoping that it's a positive position. Maybe Mrs. Renton's able to clarify further.
Barbara Renton would like to come in at this point, please. Barbara.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Councillor Drysdale, I don't have the exact figures, to hand either, but I know that the council does incredibly well in terms of levering additional funding from the Scottish Government to support our overall approach to housing development, both our own build and, other developers as well. Where we sit in the league table, I don't know, but I don't think that we're, I would consider ourselves to be at the top, nearer the top of the league table than any place else. But I don't have those exact figures, but we will get them to you. But it is an ongoing approach that the council is taking to ensure that we have, we take all the opportunities that we can to look at our housing sites through the strategic housing investment plan as well, which is approved by committee.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Lane.
Thanks, Deputy Provost. Yes, throughout this report I see the effect COVID has had on various issues, and perhaps Councillor Robertson may wish to address the fact that he refused to spend any of the COVID money, so maybe having a look closer to home rather than trying to get me to look further afield. I was wondering, under the point of challenges, there's opportunities, so I was wondering what the additional financial resources that's been provided by the governments to Perth and Kinross, if you have a total figure for that. Page 63.
I don't have the report open, sorry, Councillor. Is that in response, is that in addition to the COVID recovery grants?
It's your challenges and opportunities that, Councillor, you had as a challenge. It was the late notification of the Scottish Government Employment Grant, and underneath it you've got opportunities, are that additional financial resources provided by the government. So I was wondering if you could give me the totality of the additional financial resources that Perth and Kinross have had. received?
I think that refers to opportunities in terms of things like the grants for additional works at the tourist sites, etc., and also in terms of town centre regeneration monies. I don't have a totality figure in terms of monies already received to date, but I think I was also hinting at, in terms of opportunities, that there are things like the Levelling Up funds and the new Shared Prosperity Fund that was just launched just at Easter time, that will give us access to additional funding going forward that will help support the delivery of the action plan. So I don't think there's an actual figure in terms of going forward, but certainly we can maybe provide some further detail in terms of to date, in terms of those additional funds.
That's fine.
Yeah,
that's
I think
fine. Thanks very much.
Just help there. Yeah, yes, it is. I mean, the bullet point refers to future opportunities.
I think we've lost you, David.
I think what David was saying was the bullet point was particularly in reference to future opportunities, which was the point I was just making about additional UK government funding, particularly going forward. But more information on that will be coming to elected members in the near future.
Alison, you did state Scottish Government and UK funding.
Yeah, both. Yeah.
But just in your comment there, you just said UK Government. So
that's the biggest opportunity going forward at the moment, but there are additional Scottish Government funds. Yes, you're right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Barnacle.
Thanks, Deputy Provost. I'm on Appendix 1, PL21 on page 92, Aerospace Kinross. It says that the project is not due for Cities Deal drawdown delivery until years 9-10, which is an awful long way away, but then goes on to say business case in development, project owner keen to progress and request early drawdown. So is it possible that timescale could be brought forward?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Barnacle. As I said in my TCTs update, yes, it's possible. The likelihood of that is, I would suggest, possibly fairly low. It will depend whether there are any additional funds available in the year that they're seeking drawdown, whether they can actually deliver the project in that one financial year. It's quite a tricky calculation, and as I say, it depends on getting access to funds via the Joint Committee. They're certainly progressing well with their business case. We actually have seen a copy of that recently, which has been submitted to both governments for comment. So the project itself is certainly pushing forward in terms of trying to get to a place where it's capable of being approved. However, the question will be whether that funding can be released at an earlier stage. As I explained with the Pitlochry project, they're actually proceeding at risk and using external funding to fund the early stages and then intending to draw the funding down later on in the programme. So there are various options available. Technically, it is possible. Whether it will happen, I think we will just have to wait and see.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Braun.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I'm referring to section 5.4. This mentions a dramatic drop in self-employed people, 40% drop in the area. As we know, of course, small businesses, one-man bands are the backbone of any economy. And I'm just wondering, are we looking at a trend which is going to get worse given the cost of living crisis that we're in? Is the 40% really the tip of the iceberg?
Thanks for the question, Councillor Braun. It was certainly something that surprised me, particularly when I was looking at the figures, because I knew that at national level there has been a drop. However, it's something that we're looking at quite closely. We've, through the Economic Task Force, we've raised it, and we've been into some discussions with Business Gateway and with GrowBiz to see if we can understand the reasons behind that. We see that most of it was male business owners, so we suspect there's maybe quite an element of tradespeople who have maybe found it very difficult through the through the pandemic, maybe struggling to get the self-employed grants, and also finding maybe it's an age profile thing and that they've just taken the opportunity to retire early. But we do need to understand what's happening there. As I say, there does seem to be a national trend, but the figures certainly seem to be significantly higher here within Perth and Kinross. So it's something we do want to look at in a bit more closely in terms of how that, we hope the trend doesn't increase, but we certainly want to understand it a little bit better in terms of the reasons behind it.
Thank you.
Can I remind members who are in the chambers, please, to speak very closely to the microphone, because those who are online are not hearing, so make sure that you move the microphone so that you are heard. Councillor McEwen, you have a further question.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. My second question is more a point of clarity on item B1 in the appendix, which is the emergency COVID business grant. The figures that are listed there, we've selected some actual funds that have gone out, but the figures seem to have typos and errors in them. The Brewers Fund has an extra comma at the end of the number, suggesting there might be more zeros to come, and the Taxi and Private Hire Fund sort of stops short of a zero, it looks like. And I would just like some clarity on those actual figures, because it looks like there's an error in the report. I'll follow up after the answer.
Apologies for that, Councillor McEwen. I mustn't have spotted that when I was looking at it more carefully before we submitted it. What I will endeavour to do is ensure that those are double checked and circulate the actual figures to you all. So I can only apologise for that, and the correct figures will be circulated.
So with that answer, obviously this is just a short list of what the Scottish Government's £85 million was distributed to, because obviously you didn't want to put everything in this report, as you've said previously. Could we as councillors get a more sort of expanded version of B1? So
yep.
We have that for our information.
Yes, that's perfectly possible. We will provide that for you.
That's perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Councillor Stewart, I think you had some other questions. Yes.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Just one. Yep. It's on the it's on 3.2 and the RAG rating. Oh, sorry. That. Sorry, for the purposes of Councillor Liz Barrett, and I think it was Councillor Drysdale, that's red, amber, green. But I do agree with them that an LOA of TLAs would be most helpful. That's a list of acronyms for three-letter abbreviation. So the red, amber, green rating mentioned in 3.2 is the how is that verified? There was quite a prominent public report, I think in Tayside recently, where an independent body had gone in and looked at the RAG rating for actions in a plan and decided that the self-certified RAG rating wasn't good enough. So I'm wondering what oversight there is, of independent oversight there is of the actions.
Thank you for the comment. It's an interesting one, Councillor Stewart. I think you're right. I think we can often put in optimism bias as officers. So it's certainly something we were conscious of. Myself and some colleagues, I certainly did the initial RAG status based on the information I had. We reviewed that with the managers within Economic Development and David, and also the report was circulated to our colleagues on the Wellbeing Task Force, and that was one of the questions we asked them, if they felt that any of the RAG statuses needed to be reviewed or stepped down from or stepped up from red, orange or green. So it wasn't externally validated in a sense by any other organisation, but certainly the task force members were asked to contribute to that process. I think, you know, it was the best we could do at the time. I think it's something that we need to keep under review, but it was certainly something we took a several stage process to. It wasn't just a first stab. We actually reviewed them over time as the report and the appendix was developed.
Thanks, that's helpful.
Thank you very much, members, for your questions, and a big thank you to Alison Seggy in particular, and to David Littlejohn for answering all these questions with so much detail. So I'm sure we're all much more aware of what was in that report than we were when we first came into the room this morning. I now invite Councillor Lyle to move the report, please.
I'll start again. Thank you very much, Deputy Provost. And again, thank you to Alison Seggy and David Littlejohn for answering the questions this morning. Just on to go back to, I think, a point made by Councillor Lane, that Alison Seggy had only mentioned the UK government and not the Scottish government in one of her responses. To be fair, that over the last 4.5 years, I have worked with the Scottish government and the UK government on town centre regeneration, on the Levelling Up Fund, and it's I'm on board, on the Shared Prosperity Fund, and also on the City Centre Regeneration Fund, which Glasgow City Council got £2 million from just recently. So just to give Councillor Lane an assurance that I do work with all governments equally, and my sole motivation is to do the very best I can for Perth and Kinross. Anyway, thank you. So this report provides an update on progress with the delivery of the Economic Wellbeing Plan approved by this Council in March last year. The plan represents a significant local investment in economic development and brings together the key actions of a number of local partners and stakeholders. Good progress is being made with a significant number of projects on target and delivering excellent outcomes for our businesses and communities. With new actions being added, as it is further developed and additional resources are being secured. We are requesting that the task force continues to meet, monitor, review and refresh the plan as necessary, and we also request that we take every opportunity to secure external funding to support its delivery. I'm happy to move this paper and wish it every success. Thank you.
Councillor Duff.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I welcome this progress report on our economic wellbeing plan. The 73 actions listed in the plan are key to assisting the recovery of our economy, creating employment opportunities in higher skilled, better paid jobs, attracting investment and diversifying our offering. I'm pleased to note the good progress which has been made in the first year of its implementation. The Economic Wellbeing Task Force contains an impressive array of partners and business support organisations and will continue to review and amend the plan to make the most of the changing circumstances and opportunities. Deputy Provost, I'd like to thank Alison Seggy and our colleagues for presenting this report today and supporting the progress we're making with our economic recovery plan. I'm happy to second the report. Thank you.
Thank you. I now open it up for comment, and the first comment is from Councillor Peter Barrett.
Thanks very much, Deputy Provost. It may be an indication of how severe a housing anorak I am, but I actually have the Scottish Government's resource planning assumption figures for affordable housing for Perth and Kinross at my fingertips. And they don't make for good reading for the future, to be honest. We got 19.3 million this year. That falls to 16.6 million next year, and for the 3 subsequent years thereafter. So I think that the excellent performance that we've had in delivering 300 affordable houses across Perth and Kinross in partnership with social landlords and housing associations is going to be tough to continue into the future. If the council house programme is reduced by 2.7 million each year for the next 5 years, that's going to be something like 100 fewer houses that we're able to build ourselves over that period of time, and we will be reliant on the contribution from our partner local housing associations and landlords. And I know that in terms of Councillor Drysdale's question, I'm not entirely sure that a league table is the appropriate measuring mechanism, but we do always ensure that we have drawn down our resource planning assumption in full, and we are frequently going back to the Scottish Government to seek further funding to do specific projects such as the wheel-in buybacks of 55 houses where we used our own council tax for affordable housing monies to help secure more affordable homes through Kingdom Housing Association. So we've got a highly efficient drawdown process. We're proactive in how we utilise our council tax for affordable funding. And I think that puts us in the Champions League, if you want to have a league metaphor, and I commend the housing team and the Housing and Communities team for their performance in doing that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Barrett. Councillor Liz Barrett.
It was actually, I'd wanted to raise another question when we were still in questions, and I deleted about the comment. It was just another housekeeping thing to ask that when red, amber, green is used, please could you put the initial red, amber or green in as well to assist those who are colourblind or are working off black and white copies. Sorry, this is dragging back to the earlier section, but you did acknowledge my question and then not follow up. Thank you.
I thought you actually meant to put a comment in. I wasn't opening up for any questions, but I'm sure officers will, bearing in mind there'll be new councillors after the election, and they will make sure they've all acronyms and everything there. It's really simple. It'd be very good for all councillors to attend these training sessions so they come up to speed with what lies ahead. So thank you. Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I think we should all be encouraged by the number of questions that came forward from this report, and I think it's one of the most important papers we've had before us for some time, and it was excellent reading, so well done to Alison Seggie and her team. The comment I'd like to make is we do face really big struggles when you think that we have some amazing hotels here in Perth and Kinross, and yet quite a few of them are running under capacity because of lack of staff. They just can't seem to get the staff required to operate at 100% efficiency, which is a big problem. That also applies to many of our other businesses in Perth and Kinross. So it's an area that we really have to address, and the report does mention that. But we should finish. I'm going to finish on a positive note. This council has spent a lot of taxpayers' money in building resources and improving our area for everyone, not just the locals, but for tourists alike. And we're now becoming a centre for outdoor activities and for, hopefully with the Perth City Hall, for a major cultural attraction as well. There was a programme the other night there on Landward. Landward was on the other night there, and it featured the Lochleven Heritage Trail in Lochleven. And funnily enough, the next day, there was people here from Fraserburgh who'd been down this way on holiday and had seen the programme and decided that was a great idea and came with their bikes to cycle around it. Well, this council was a big support in building the Lochleven Heritage Trail. So the long-term future of the council is good if we keep spending money on things that attract people and encourage people to stay in our area. So well done.
Thank you very much. Councillor McEwen.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. This report describes money well spent on removing barriers for business and individuals to get into work. With targets for more activity and help more residents into work, this is to be commended. The case studies in Appendix 2 are examples of the great work and the huge impact this investment can have. And the many projects detailed in Appendix 1 shows the diversity of the business opportunities in Perth and Kinross and opportunities for employment, and that this is a great place to stay and visit and to do your business. This report also highlights some of the challenges COVID has presented to this improvement work, but the economic context that we now see going forward deserves our closest attendance. Universal claimants are up 91% in Perth and Kinross to 9.5 thousand claimants, an increase of 131% in working claimants. This is a sign that we have a low wage economy, and that's not good enough for the people of Perth and Kinross. This affects directly the council. We have a 32% increase in rent arrears with our tenants in social housing as a consequence of these stresses on people's budget. We've seen a year-on-year decrease in the average earnings in Perth and Kinross. We are now £47 a week on average behind the Scottish average, when in 2018 we were actually ahead. With our need to grow the economy and recover from COVID, meet our climate change objectives and responsibilities, it is clear Perth and Kinross need a council that will work with and not against the efforts of the Scottish Government to deliver jointly for Perth and Kinross a strategy for economic transition. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. And along with thanking Alison Seggy earlier on, I think I just, at the start, I'd just like to say thank you, Deputy Provost, since you're, especially as you're standing down, for the manner in which you've chaired debates and discussions, especially over the last 2 years. And I think you've done that with real skill. I want to return to the question of the COVID reserve, because it really, we've had confirmed today, we really had at Strategic Policy and Resources last week, we have 8 million in that fund. We've drawn down on that since the budget to a limited degree, 120,000 for expanding support to youth services. Nobody could disagree with that. We had 28,000 was allocated to trading standards, but we're still sitting there on 8 million. Now, I know some people think it's prudent to hold off spending that money, but that 8 million is not part of our structural deficit. It is money that has been provided by the Scottish Government to deal with the pandemic, with the aftermath of the pandemic, and also with the cost of living crisis that's partly being caused by that by that pandemic. Yet I think there's a danger that 8 million, it is an earmarked reserve, it can be carried forward, but it almost becomes, it seems to me, there's a danger it becomes almost in effect part of our general reserves. The funding there is for a specific purpose and it should be utilised. And the problems of our citizens in Perth and Kinross are being faced here and now, not just a year or 2 years down the road. And I give an example. One of the items that we put forward, and I think it may yet need to be revisited, was support to voluntary groups. An uplift, a one-off uplift in support to voluntary groups, bodies like CAF, bodies like PCAVs, that, where we can leverage voluntary effort and we can provide much greater support in the community. So in addition to what's been provided in terms of business grants, it's that support I think is really needed now. And I know we'd, at a cost of 488,000 against the COVID Reserve Fund, we argued for a 7.5% uplift on a one-year basis for people to get through this inflation crisis. And that's almost exactly equivalent to the current rate of inflation in terms of CPI. I think that, for instance, is something that has got to be revisited, because many of those voluntary organisations are now going to face a real crunch. We've talked about construction price inflation, but it's the inflation these bodies are facing in terms of delivery of services and support, especially to the most vulnerable in our community. So I really do think that 8 million on the COVID Reserve Fund can't just sit there and we dither and delay. I know some people argue it's prudent that we don't really touch it. The issues are here and now, and we've got to deal with them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Donaldson. Councillor Lean.
Thanks very much, Deputy Provost. I'd like to echo Councillor Robert, in case I don't get a chance to later, Councillor Donaldson's comments about the way you've chaired meetings since you stepped in the boots, and I really appreciate it. Also, Councillor Lyle, I totally accept and understand that he has worked with anybody who will provide funding for Perth and Kinross Council and fought for it, as every one of us within this chamber should, because first and foremost, party politics should be out. We should be looking forward to helping the people of Perth and Kinross and giving our officers and our as much funding as they can and attracting it in. Unfortunately, moving forward, I feel that the team that are doing a great job here, and the economic development team, are going to be hard pressed. Being a rural council, the rural economy is really struggling. We're struggling for lack of housing. We've got more and more Airbnbs. We've got more and more second homes in some of the rural areas. I can understand that. It's a beautiful places we have in rural Perth and Kinross. But it's meaning that people of working age cannot find accommodation. Previous rentals are becoming short-term lets, and there's nowhere for them to stay. So the lack of available housing, the positive of housing, and that means that we, as somebody said earlier, we do not have enough people to fulfil the hospitality roles. We do not have enough people in rural areas to fill healthcare roles. We do not have enough people to even man our shops, etc., because there's no place that they can afford to stay. So we have to, as a council, address this moving forward. We also have to take some responsibility that when we're making decisions, i.e. when we decided to go with Tayside contracts and frozen meals, the saving that was achieved there was almost solely at the cut in wages to people who were cooks, who were reduced from grade 5 to grade 3, and that means that their pay at the lower end of the scale was reduced even further. So I think when we make decisions, we really have to look at it in totality. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lane. And the final comment is from Councillor Braun.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. And may I first of all compliment officers for this comprehensive report. Obviously, a concern, as I raised in the questions, is the rising or drop in self-employed people within Perth and Kinross. I suspect part of the drop is because we are tourists, and part of the problem, of course, is that we are a tourist and leisure related economy, and hopefully the passing of COVID will see an encouragement of people coming back into that industry. The more visitors coming up to help those self-employed people regain ground. It is a shame, of course, that many of those small businesses, which are small businesses, self-catering businesses, are now going to be burdened with an extra cost because of the short-term licensing scheme, which most objected to. On a final footnote, if I may, remind Councillor Donaldson that this administration, when it comes to voluntary bodies, did put aside £30,000 for both RASAC and Perthshire Women's Aid in our budget this year. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now, I'm told that Councillor Rebecca has a comment. Is that correct? Yeah, I don't see it in my chat box. This is going to be the final comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I was late in putting my C in. My apologies. I did feel, however, briefly that it was worth commenting that when the health and wellbeing plan first came, the economic health and wellbeing plan first came to council, I was a little bit sceptical, and I did suggest that I was worried we wouldn't put our money where our mouth is, and I'm delighted to say that I think I was probably wrong with that. There has been a lot of money going into this, and I don't think we should really worry whether it's Scottish Government money, council money, or money that we've levered in from other places. It's still money, and it's essential that we keep levering in money for this plan. It's a good news story. I think there's lots of great work that has been done since this plan was first mooted, and I applaud it and commend it. I do, however, agree with Councillor McEwen, I think we're in for a real hard time going forward. I think the majority of our citizens are going to find money tough, whether it's Brexit, whether it's COVID recovery, whether it's the cost of living crisis. And I do think whatever shape and colour a new council will take post the election, I do believe that the economic well-being of our citizens will have to be paramount. And I do think there will need to be an element of working together for the benefit of our citizens, because I do think there's stormy waters ahead. But I commend this report in the meantime. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your for your comments. Thank all members for the comments, and we're happy to agree this report. I'm proposing that we have a 10-minute comfort break, and we will return at 11:40. Thank you.
Right, members, we've all had a little break and I think we needed it. We'll go to item number 7, the Scottish Local Government Elections, 5th of May 22, induction arrangements for new and returning elected members. Can I ask Lisa Simpson, Head of Legal and Governance Services, to introduce the report?
Thank you, Provost, and thank you, councillors. The report is fairly self-explanatory. It's setting out the draft proposed training and induction timetable for new and returning councillors post the election in May. I'm happy to take any questions on that. We have engaged with the member officer working group. We have also taken into account feedback from the exit survey questionnaires that were issued to you all, and thanks to those who returned and completed those. This is actually setting out in the first few weeks the key bits of training and development that need to be done in order to allow us to continue with the business. It is proposed that there will be a longer and more comprehensive training and induction programme that will continue throughout the whole tenure, and different phases of that will be brought back to Council for approval and sign-off in due course. But what is before you today is the proposed timetable for the first session of the new council, ensuring that everyone has the appropriate and mandatory training in place to enable them to execute their business in their first term. I'm happy to take any questions from anyone.
Councillor McDade.
Thank you, Provost, and apologies, I put it in the chat there. Thanks, Head of Legal and Governance, for the paper, and just a couple of quick comments, mostly on the draft induction programme. I'm just slightly unsure as to why there's going to be 2 sessions with newly elected councillors. It says due to COVID public health restrictions, but obviously there is none anymore from that point of view. So it would probably be quite good if everyone can be in the same room, even if it's in the Civic Hall or something, so that everyone can hear the questions, because I think from my point of view, that was one of the more useful things. Often the more experienced councillors asked really good questions, and if you're not in the session that those questions are asked, and you're going to miss that. So that was just one of the points. And then on the Saturday, we're only being allowed in between 12 and 3 if we're re-elected, I should say. Making absolutely no assumptions there at all. But previously we were in for the full day on the Saturday to allow administration forming, etc., which was kind of, I thought, the point anyway. So 3 hours is quite a short window for that. And then just there was a couple of other points around things like access to committee papers the day before the first Saturday full council might be quite stressful for everyone concerned, and particularly if you're not available that day. I think it would perhaps be good to run sessions around that earlier as well. So those are just a few gentle comments.
Yep, thanks, Councillor McDade. I think the timing on the Saturday, that's a provisional time put in, but clearly once we see what the results, what the makeup is, what the potential for discussions are on the Saturday, then we're looking to be flexible to accommodate that. In terms of the point about accessing committee papers, I think that's a point that Scott and I can take on board, and we would be happy to work with new councillors who weren't familiar with CMIS, etc., on a one basis if need be. I think the other point as well is in terms of the moment, in terms of the timetable has been drafted based on our current health and safety advice, which is still maintaining a degree of social distancing. If that changes over the course, then obviously scheduling and numbers for attendance can be adjusted. The other point I think was something that you'd raised to me, which was about people perhaps who were working and not able to attend meetings during the day. That is a point that we've made. We've also taken a note of, and once we know who has returned or who the new councillors are, if people need arrangements whereby we need to do twilight sessions on a perhaps more bespoke basis, we're fully committed to taking that into account and working with them on that basis.
Thank you. Councillor Ahern.
Thank you very much. My question's on the licensing committee. I notice there's 2 training sessions for the licensing board. However, there's no timetable for any licensing committee training prior to the 16th of June when the first committee is, apart from a half-hour Q&A before the committee, which is usually used to go over any legal issues on any of the papers. And I believe that as a quasi-judicial committee, there should be a training session for the members sitting on that committee.
I think actually what's happened there, Councillor Ahern, and thanks for drawing that to our attention, the mandatory training has been put in for the licensing board, but that point that you're making about the licensing committee, I will revisit that and look at that and schedule something in.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Williamson, please.
Thank you, Provost. My question is really related to what Councillor McDade identified about the Friday, and many people will have husbands, wives, and probably friends coming down to see the election or view the count. My question was if there was going to be a second session for the signing, when potentially would that be, or has that been factored in? And could potentially, if you do have a husband or wife or whoever coming along to see you at the count, can they come along and see you signing your declaration, etc.?
That hasn't actually been the practice to date. I mean, the signing of the declaration is a legal requirement, so it will be subject to restrictions within the chamber and numbers, but it's not normal. It's not a public event. It's a procedural requirement for new councillors and returning councillors. So as far as I'm aware, there are no intention to make that a public event in any way.
Can I come back in, Provost?
Sorry, Councillor Williamson, I thought you were going to speak there.
Yeah, I am. It was not so much trying to make it a public event, Lisa. It was more that it is going to be a long day, and God just knows how long we're going to be actually in the meeting post-election. If we're assuming we get elected, but I was just concerned about we're now going to have to leave husbands and wives hanging around Perth until all this has been finished. That was my primary concern.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the Chief Executive would like to say something.
Thank you, Provost. We would be happy to look at the arrangements to ensure that family members were accommodated, even if there's a tea or coffee available. But the event itself, in terms of the declaration signing, is, as Lisa has stated, a private event. But I'm sure we could accommodate that and allow you to get your declaration signed. And then for many members, I'm sure they would want to go out and celebrate after the event.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Can I call on Councillor Stewart, please?
Thanks, Provost. It was a question about the IT equipment. That all of the new or returning councillors would be issued with Microsoft Surface Pro and offered a smartphone. Can I've upgraded to a laptop following an earlier accident with the Surface Pro. I find this far easier to use, so I wonder if we could offer new councillors the choice of equipment. Some might find it easier. That's not.
Councillor Stewart, I honestly don't know. I would need to take that back to IT, but I'm happy to feed that back.
Can I also call on Councillor Forbes, please?
Thanks, Provost. And actually, bizarrely, my question is very similar to Councillor Stewart's. I would just like to endorse what you said, Lisa, if that's okay. I find the laptop an awful lot better. But my question was actually on a similar vein, but about something entirely different. After the discussion we had in the MOG last week or so, I did write back to you with this point, and it's fairly straightforward. It's about allowing council phones to run WhatsApp. You'll be amazed at how many small community groups run WhatsApp groups to manage their business, and with our phones being locked from WhatsApp, it makes it difficult for us to participate in them. So given that Dundee Council, I know for sure, open their phones up to WhatsApp, and the Scottish Parliament do, I don't see any security risk. So could could the council open up the phones that they give to new members to the WhatsApp service?
The advice from our information security specialists are no. And part of the problem is also the contract terms of WhatsApp. I'm not sure what the arrangements are for either Scottish Government or any other authority, I don't know. But for business use, WhatsApp is not permitted. And in terms of security for council business, bearing in mind also as well that it should all be FOI-able. I do know that in some places where people do use WhatsApp for business communications, then phones are occasionally handed in upon request if there's an FOI inquiry. But the advice that we have from our information security specialists is that it wouldn't be appropriate for business use and that there are other mechanisms, namely Teams.
I don't see any other questions. Can I ask Councillor Lyle to move the report?
Thank you very much, Provost. This report sets out proposals to deliver a comprehensive induction programme to provide the best possible support for new and returning elected members in the lead up to the summer recess. The first few weeks looks at setting the scene for all councillors with a particular focus on delivering IT kit training and opportunities to meet the extended executive leadership forum, outlining roles and responsibilities and council decision-making processes, which will be a key focus prior to the proposed statutory council meeting on the 25th of May 2022. After the first meeting of the council, the focus will then move to preparing elected members for their roles in the decision-making process and raising awareness of the work undertaken in each of the council's committees. Plans are currently being developed for after the summer recess for a programme of workshops and briefings on a range of areas, including risks and the importance of risk management. I would ask all those councillors who are standing for re-election to participate in this induction process, be elected, and this will help make the 22 induction programme a positive and worthwhile experience for all new elected members. I am therefore happy to move the recommendations within the council and council paper and ask that we note progress to date with the development of the induction arrangements for elected members to the council following the local elections on May 22, and also to approve the proposed draft elected member induction programme. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, Councillor. I call on Councillor Duff to second the report.
Thank you, Provost. With just over a week to go until the council elections, we're all aware that whatever happens, there will be a fair number of new councillors coming into office very shortly. I'm sure we can all remember what it was like when we first started out as a councillor, unsure what we were supposed to do, how we were supposed to do it, or who we needed to contact to get it done. The induction programme set out in the papers is comprehensive, but without being overwhelming, and will be of considerable value to new and returning councillors alike. There will be a need for returning councillors to support the new ones, and for the experienced councillors to take up roles in committees they may not have had experience of during the current session. Provost, a lot of work has gone into pulling the programme together, and I'd like to thank the Head of Legal and Governance and the Democratic Services team for providing what will be a robust induction package for the new council. I'm happy to second the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. We'll move to comments. Are there any comments? Councillor Reddick, please.
Thanks, Provost. I think this is a really good programme of training here. I think it's a great idea that we've got this in place, and it's a provisional way of going forward. I think it's tremendous. So there's no implied criticism with my slightly negative comment about flexibility being needed, because most councillors, or at least a lot of councillors, once they're elected post 5th of May, will have other jobs by very definition of the role. and I think flexibility will be required. I'm reassured that Lisa Simpson, I think, has already mentioned that we will have that flexibility, that twilight briefing sessions and chairing sessions will be allowed, and I think that's really fantastic. So overall, really good, really pleased to see a reasonably definitive programme of training in place. It's to be commended. The only other comment I would make is I do think it will be really important for colleagues and peers of newly elected members to support them. I was really lucky that I had Dave Dugan in the ward and Henry Anderson in the office, and indeed Tom Gray and Maureen in the office for all the questions that I thought were silly at the time, but I was never made to feel that they were silly. So I think peer support, as has already been mentioned, I think by Councillor Duff, will be really important as well. But I do like the fact that we've at least got a provisional and fairly definitive, if that's not a paradoxical term, programme of training in place. As long as there's flexibility that goes along with that, I think we're in a good place. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Brebeck. Are there any comments? No. To move the report? We'll move on to item 8, the proposed timetable of committee meetings, May to December 22. Can I ask Scott Henry, Acting Democratic Services Manager, to summarise the draft timetable? Scott.
Thank you, Provost. Members, similar to the induction plan that you've just been presented with, the timetable, which is in draft form, is presented to you today for any feedback or comments that you may have. It's based on similar recent cycles that we've had, and is also based on the current decision-making structure that we have. As per recently, the majority of meetings are scheduled to take place on a Monday and Wednesday, albeit noting that there are some meetings that we've had to schedule on other days in terms of timings. Again, we're proposing one meeting per day as opposed to the traditional 2 committees per day, and this is again similar to how we moved during the pandemic. This is as we explore moving into hybrid meetings. I think the suggestion is that we continue as much as possible with one committee per day. This timetable will be presented to the new council at the statutory meeting as part of a fuller decision-making options paper, and obviously they'll have a chance to look at the structure. But today, just keen to get any feedback on general timings, cycles, scheduling of meetings. So happy to take any questions or comments.
Thank you very much, Scott. Are there any questions of Scott? Is that your hand up, Sandra? Sorry, I haven't got a screen. Carry on.
Thank you, Provost. Yes, obviously subject to what Mr Henry's just said in terms of it will be for the new council to decide if this is to be the draft provisional timetable. Can I ask, there is, I assume it's just an error, the 9th of November, lifelong learning, 9:30, all of the others are at 10, and I'm delighted we're moving back to 10 as well, because it's been quite a fun time starting at 9:30, so but I'm assuming it's just an error.
Yes, I think that's just a typo. The reason for moving back to 10 o'clock is again thinking about if we're moving back to hybrid meetings, travelling time for elected members, we thought it made sense. And again, that's on the proviso that most meetings are 1 per day. So yeah, so that's a typo. Thanks, we'll pick that up.
Thank you. And Councillor Barnacle, please.
Thanks, Provost. As convener thereof, I just wanted to welcome the inclusion of the Kinross Shire Area Committee in the timetable with 4 meetings to the end of the year. We've already had 2 as part of the pilot, and I just wish to express the hope that this becomes a permanent feature of the Council's timetable of committee meetings going forward. Thanks again.
Thank you, Councillor Barnacle. Can I call on Councillor Ahern, please?
Thank you very much, Provost. Mine's just a picky question, and it's, I suppose, born by Councillor Barrett, Liz Barrett's question earlier about writing a glossary of terms. I noticed where you've got DM. DM doesn't exist in the glossary, but P and DM is as well. So just so that there's no confusion for new elected members to wonder what on earth the DM committee is, if that can be put in full.
Yeah, apologies, we've not updated the glossary, but actually the DM is going to be part of a proposal which officers are suggesting to the new council to change the name of the committee to the Development Management Committee. So that will be again presented to the new council, but we'll update the glossary and make sure that all the in there.
Thank you, and Councillor Stewart, please.
Thanks, Provost. Just reflecting on what the Acting Democratic Services Manager just said, the point about having included planning in the title of the committee in the last term was to make it more obvious for the public. Planning is a thing that people understand. Development management isn't necessarily. But my question was going to be the statutory meeting of the council is proposed for the 25th of May, and there is not an actual full meeting of the council, if I read the timetable correctly, until the 5th of October. That's okay, my mistake. All right, 29th of June. I beg your pardon. I'll look at that question.
Thank you. Is there any more questions? Okay, can we just move? Somebody else? Can we move to comments then? If we have any comments. Okay, just agree. Or does Ander? You got your hand up again.
Sorry, yes, I did want to make a comment. I was just waiting to see if Councillor Lyle was moving the paper first, but I'm quite happy to comment first. I'm flexible.
Happy to formally move the paper. Apologies, Provost. I'm happy to formally move the paper.
I'm happy to second it and comment at the same time. That's fine. Anyway, yeah, no, I think thank you again for bringing this forward. Hope that when the new councillors are getting their options presented, as the Acting Democratic Services Manager has outlined, that there will be some options set out. That one of those options might be for even potentially a mix of times of meetings, including evening meetings. Given what Councillor Redbeck said about there is a likely increase potentially in the number of working age councillors, to hopefully open up the accessibility of the council to people with caring and working responsibilities outside of the chamber. So I just request that that be considered as part of the options when they are drawn up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we're going to move to the council valedictory. We've had 5 long years and we've all worked hard together. But councillors, on the 4th of May, our 5-year term of office will come to an end. And this will be the end of an era for many councillors who have served this council for a number of years. Some of you will not be seeking re-election. Others have put their names forward for another term of office. And as this is the last full council meeting of this term, I'd like to take this opportunity to reflect back on what has been an interesting 5 years. The time has certainly passed quickly, and there's no doubt we've seen a significant amount of change along the way. Our Chief Executive, Bernadette Malone, retired back in 2018, and we were joined by Karen Reid, who left to take up a new post in 2020. Barbara Renton then took over as interim Chief Executive, with Thomas Glenn joining us in November 2021. But we were all saddened by the passing of our fellow councillors, Ian Campbell, Bob Band, and Henry Anderson. I'm sure we all missed them very much. In total, the council saw 5 by-elections and a change in leadership, with Councillor Murray Lyle taking over from Ian. And it certainly is quite unusual to see so much change in such a short period of time. In March 2020 came the news of the COVID pandemic. It was a very difficult time for us all, and looking back, we were all worried for what would happen to us, to our friends and our families. Many of you, like myself, will have had COVID and will have known someone who succumbed to the virus. However, all of us across the council pulled together and worked quickly to identify our priorities in supporting our citizens during COVID, all whilst adapting new ways of working. Despite these challenges and changes, we've all continued to do our best and strive to meet the needs of our citizens. As well as continuing with business as normal, I thought it would be helpful to remind Council of some of the recent successes that we should be proud of, as we have achieved a great deal. In no particular order, plans are moving ahead for the revamped City Hall, which will house the Stone of Destiny. Perth has joined UNESCO's Creative City Network after becoming the UK's first city of crafts and folk art. St Paul's Church has been transformed into a wonderful outdoor event space, which is used extensively. Perth and Kinross Council received the Gold Award in the Employers Recognition Scheme, and the Freedom of the City was awarded to the former Lord Lieutenant of Perth and Kinross, Brigadier Sir Melville Jemison, and more recently, St Johnstone FC. Perth and Kinross is well known as the Big Tree Country. Perth was awarded Champion City status for the Queen's Green Canopy in this, the Platinum Jubilee year. And lastly, we are awaiting to hear the outcome of Civic Honours application for the Lord's Provostship title. Whilst it can be unsettling, lots of good things come from change. And I think we've seen that happen during and after COVID. The pandemic came out of the blue and forced us all to quickly adapt. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank our council officers and staff who went the extra mile in extremely difficult circumstances. They deserve our thanks and praise for all they have done in supporting us these past 5 years. And in particular, Barbara Renton rolled her sleeves up and undertook the role of interim chief executive at possibly the most challenging time there could have been. Councillors, thank you all most sincerely for your hard work and commitment these past 5 years. There have been many interesting debates between all political parties as we all try to do our best for our constituents and our communities in which we serve. COVID, it seems, has enhanced how we work with our communities and perhaps forged more closer links between us as we care for our people. Just thank you all once again, and I'll open up to any comments or questions people would like to bring up. Okay, all quiet. Right. Councillor Lyle.
Thank you, Provost. I'll begin again. As one of the councillors who are not seeking re-election, I'd just like to make a few brief comments. Firstly, and acknowledging your comments previously, it is appropriate to remember the three councillors who are no longer with us, who set off on this journey with us 5 years ago, namely Ian Campbell, Bob Band, Henry Anderson, who all sadly passed away during the last term. Also, I would like to take the opportunity to remember Jock Monroe, who sadly passed away at PRI during the last 5 years. I'd also like to thank retiring councillors for their service. Some of them, and most of us whom I name, have served a number of terms, namely Willie Wilson, Mike Barnacle, Kathleen Baird, Lewis Simpson and Tom Gray, and I would like to thank them all for their service. I must also add a particular thank you to the council staff who've given so much, particularly over the last 2 years of this COVID pandemic. I am personally aware of many instances where people have gone well beyond their normal terms of employment to help the most vulnerable in Perth and Kinross, despite significant risks to their own health and well-being, and I thank them for their service. It would be remiss of me not to mention the 4 chief executives I've worked with in the past 5 years: Bernadette Malone, Karen Reid, Barbara Renton and Thomas Glenn. And I would like to just personally to thank them all for their guidance and support over the past 5 years. It's been an absolute pleasure to work with them, and I have valued their advice and experience. I'd also like to thank other members of staff for their advice over the past 5 years, because many have given me advice and support in lots of the challenges that I have come across in my role. However, it's not only those at the top of the organisation who deserve thanks, but all the staff and whatever role they've been employed to do. And I wish all the staff of Perth and Kinross, I wish them all good health and fortune over the years to come. Finally, I would just like to say thank you and for the opportunity I've had in the past few years to lead this magnificent organisation. And I would like to wish the next administration all the luck in the world, leading without doubt the best local authority in the country. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your kind words, Councillor Lyle. Can I ask Councillor Gray, who would like to say something?
Thank you, Provost, and thank you for your service over the last 5 years, where you have faithfully led the council from the Provostship chair. I'm extremely grateful for the privilege of representing communities of my home area, Strathallan ward. 12 years, it passes rather quickly when you add it all up. Somehow it's gone in a flash, but there you go. I'm also grateful for the patience of Perth and Kinross officers in assisting we, dare I say, non-professional councillors. Having said that, it is sad that so many senior officers have moved on in recent years. There are, however, a few still with us, who to my mind have given outstanding service over my entire time here. Barbara Renton, Sheena Devlin, Claire Miller, Jeff Fogg and Colin Elliott, all people I've found extremely easy to work with and very, very helpful in all that they do, very professional, and do their damnedest to see that we get the results that we're looking for. I don't wish to see too much more. There are many junior officers, let's say, or those not so much in contact with us, who clearly do good work, and they too deserve our thanks. I've enjoyed my time here. It's sad to leave anything that you've been involved in for any length of time and something you've put a lot of effort into. But I'm quite sure new councillors will come forward and fulfil the role every bit as well as those of us who are leaving now. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gray. Councillor Wilson, you would like to say something?
Thank you, Provost, very much indeed, and thanks for your kind remark. Barbara Renton, in her usual direct manner, said to me, well, what are you thinking and what are you feeling? Mixed emotions is the two-word answer to that. But I can tell you, Provost, that I was very nervous on my first meeting nearly 42 years ago. I'm even more nervous now, if that helps Barbara. There's a huge thanks to a whole number of people. But I want to start off with some of the most important folk. The caretakers of this building, the cleaning staff, the maintenance staff, and others who run the place smoothly for our benefit in High Street, Fuller House, and throughout all our properties in Perth and Kinross. The civic team, Jackie, Stuart, David, Stephen and Michelle, who have been exemplary in their service to the council, but also their personal help to me and to yourself, Robert. I will miss them very much indeed. Yes, we've had 4 chief executives in what has been a busy time. And names of Bernadette, Karen, Barbara and Thomas already been mentioned. And I think I will miss that cerebral contact and sometimes delightful discussion with the chief executive of the time, and sometimes the argument, but never the disagreement. To all our heads of service throughout the council, I want to express my very warmest thanks to them as well. And I'm not going to start narrating everybody, Provost, because I could keep you here for a long time. And I'm trying hard not. To all of the staff in every department and every service in the council, and again, the list is almost endless, but particularly because some of them may be listening, the legal and governance staff and committee services who have served us well. To the roads services, and I include all of them, who I've had one of the most interesting relationships with for 40 plus years. But I want to commend the service to everybody in communities and housing and also education and children's services. It was a great privilege to serve for 2.5 years as the vice convener of that service. So to all of the staff in every department and every nook and cranny of the council, huge thank you. There have been a lot of provosts in my time, Provost. And again, the list is fairly long. But to you and to Libby, wish you well. One thing I will miss is getting a cuddle from the Provost's wife on a regular basis. And I make no apologies for saying that. However, if you're successful in your re-election, I might be visiting Erdf sometime when you've got a council meeting. To John Hulbert, who I was deputy to previously, and I'm still in touch with John fairly regular. And to the lovely Alec Murray, who was the first provost when I was a deputy. Alec never failed to be entertaining, diligent, kind, gentle, generous. And going back to Johnny Matheson, who did 2 terms actually, and one bit of advice was don't do 2 terms, right? I think, but he looked me up and down as a staunch but decent conservative, and I as a sole liberal, and he looked me up and down after a week. He said, "You're going to be a thorn in our flesh." I said, "I hope so." I couldn't narrate something about Provost without saying how much I miss Bob Scott, who was exemplary in his Provost role, great fun, and so far the sole Liberal Democrat Provost, Perth Kinross. And 2 other folk that I think bear mention. Bonnie Jean McCormack, I still call her Bonnie Jean, who was very supportive to me when I needed it. And also Liz Grant, who followed on as our only 2, so far, our only 2 female provosts. I've also had the great privilege, Provost, of working, and sometimes very closely, with at least 3 Lord Lieutenants. David Butter, sadly no longer with us. David Montgomery, who was always a great support, and the irrepressible Brigadier Mel Jimison, who I think we were so well founded having Mel as our Lord Lieutenant. And I said to Stephen Leckie at the time he took over, "You have got some really serious act to follow." And indeed. And it was typical of Mel to drop me a note when he heard about my retirement. So good wishes to them all. The very best wishes to all of my fellow retirees. To those who are seeking re-election, we'll look forward with interest to the result in that process. It's been a huge pleasure to serve as a councillor and as a deputy provost on 3 occasions. You cannot do that, however, Provost, without the support of your family. And I've had the unstinting and regular loyal support of Margaret for all that time. You kind of knew she was marrying into politics when she met me. But I don't think she ever thought that she would have somebody who would be away so often and allow her to watch any television programme she wanted. There's going to be a bit of tension in the future because I'm not sitting at home listening to the, is it loud women? That there are limits to a man's patience. And I don't mean in any way a sexist remark about that. It's just the noise, Professor. Just hear the noise. I've also had huge support from my family, the wider family, and the tolerance of sons, David and Fraser, who at times have thought their father should have been carted away and incarcerated somewhere, but always at the end of the day rallied in terms of support. But, Provost, the greatest privilege of all has been to serve the public and in the ward that I've represented for nearly 42 years and enjoyed their confidence at being re-elected during that term. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Millie, for that short address. Thank you very much. Now, can I have Councillor Barnacle, please?
Yeah, thanks, Provost. Difficult to follow what Willie said, really, because his terms have been so much longer than my length of service. 23 years seems a short period compared with Willie's, but it's been a huge privilege to represent the people of Kinross Shire to the best of my ability over this period, and that's included, of course, convenerships under development control and the environment. We don't get anywhere without working with others, and I'd particularly like to thank all the officers for their assistance over the years when I've been trying to take things forward, particularly from the Environment Service, and also fellow councillors who supported me with initiatives. Particular mention former Councillor Cuthbert and present councillors Purvis and Robertson. I remember when I lost my late wife Mary, former councillor Livingston came to the church as a lay preacher the week before, mentioning that, and he said, I wouldn't have been the councillor I was without the support of my wife, and how true that was. One can list a whole load of initiatives, and I'm not going to bore you with that. It's all in the Kinross newsletter anyway, for those bored enough to look it up. I would say one thing that I didn't include in that, which was really off the wall a bit, but I was involved in the campaign for that the Perthshire Alliance for the Real Cairngorms set up, which was cross-party to extend the Cairngorms Park into Highland Perthshire, and we won that campaign. And we also, I was heavily involved in the boundaries of the Trossachs National Park, being including Loch Earn and St Fillan's. So although I never got to serve on a national park board, I was very involved in it in the formative years. So that's really what I wanted to say. Thanks to all who've helped in what I've tried to do in my 23 years. Thanks again.
Councillor Lane.
Thanks, Provost. I would like to thank everybody across the chamber who's here today, and the people who've decided that they are seeking pastures new, and others of us who have put ourselves forward to the people to decide whether we come back. I think nobody comes into this chamber with any other idea than they want to help. They have totally different views on a whole lot of things, but at the end of the day, you've got to respect other people's views and accept when your view does not prevail. I feel it's been a difficult term this time compared with the first term I've served because of COVID. There's not the chance to sit and speak to people off the record or break bed. You're only meeting people on the screen, and it can make things more fractious. But I wish everybody who's currently decided to retire from the scene all the best and a long, happy life in retirement. And I'm sure that you'll be avidly tuning into the YouTube videos on a weekly basis to appraise yourself of what's going on. Or maybe not, maybe your life will be more fulfilled than that. I know it was inadvertent, but I would just like to mention, because I don't know all the past councillors who may have passed away in the previous term, but one character I'm sure that Councillor Wilson and the Provost will remember is Jack Coburn. I remember him fondly, so I'd just like to mention it. And more importantly, for all of us here, Fiona O'Neill tragically passed away in the past term. I'd like to thank all the officers who've helped. We've had frank discussions, and that's the way it should be. And the best discussions are often in private, not in public, because I think you get more things sorted out there where you don't have to be guarded in what you say. And I certainly have enjoyed these jousts and hopefully come back and we'll continue to enjoy them, but we'll see that. Councillor Barnacle, I'll have to pull his leg a little bit. I think he missed out Councillor Waters for being supportive with what he done. I can remember an occasion when he was very happy to have Councillor Waters' support in an evening, but we'll draw a veil over that. Just sorry to see everybody disappearing after today, and I've missed our Christmas dues the last couple of times, which I've enjoyed all the rest of them. Even some of the stories from Willie Wilson and Peter Barrett and that going on in it, but I've enjoyed all of it. So good luck to everybody as you move forward, and good luck to all the officers, and let's drive forward and not be too self-congratulatory, because we have a massive task. The new council coming in's got a massive task, as have the officers, and I'm sure they'll all rise to the occasion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gann. And God, I did it again.
It's 5 years now. Try it again and see if we can get it right.
I really had to do it today. Councillor Purvis, please.
Thank you, Provost. It has been a great privilege to represent the area where I've grown up as one of Kinross's councillors for the past 5 years. Despite the loss of our council several decades ago, as you all know, Kinross retains a strong sense of local identity. And as I'm sure you'll be fed up of hearing, we do think differently and we do want to do things differently. I'm very grateful that councillors have recognised this and allowed the Kinross local committee pilot to progress. I pay tribute to my councillor colleague, Councillor Barnacle, for his tireless campaigning over many years to make this a reality. I would also like to thank officers for the flexibility that they have shown in working to establish this pilot. In my view, the devolution of power is already making a difference locally. We have already seen thorny issues that have remained unresolved for many years reach a positive conclusion, and we have seen positive engagement and interest from local residents and community groups in the project. And while the committee is not a panacea, I'm confident that the pilot will achieve its objectives, and I'm pleased to note that many of the candidates in Kinross next week have made clear their commitment to the committee, and it is my hope that it becomes a permanent feature of Perth and Kinross Council going forward. I feel we've made a lot of progress in other areas in Kinross too. We've seen significant improvements in road safety, such as the lowering of speed limits and more vehicle activated signs, and I'm pleased to see that more funding is on its way for this as well. The Community Investment Fund, like in other areas of Perth and Kinross, has also been a great success in Kinross. It has supported many causes right across the length and breadth of the county, including village halls and other facilities and initiatives. We're very lucky that in Kinross there has been a long tradition of all local councillors working together on matters of common concern. And while we may disagree on some, or Councillor Robertson might argue most, political issues, I have enjoyed working with my colleagues Mike, Willie and Richard over the past 5 years, and I would like to think that that spirit of cooperation will continue post the election. There are some areas where progress has not been what I would have hoped. The planning system, for example, still seems very distant from our communities. It's not right that developers can get a second shot at approval for applications by going over councillors' heads to the Scottish Government. I remain fully supportive of the principle of a community right of appeal that would level the playing field between local communities and big developers. The council also still needs to become more agile and willing to try new things and adapt to new ideas. There remains many efficiencies that could be made to be reinvested into improving core public services, or indeed to limiting the need to increase council tax each year, and I hope that's something that can be progressed in the next term. Having been a member of the Integration Joint Board for the last 4 years, I'm still greatly concerned that NHS Tayside has not properly grasped the seriousness of the independent review of mental health services by Dr. David Strang. There is an urgent need to improve trust and respect between the patients, carers and staff and the NHS itself. Recent attempts to conduct an options appraisal, if you can even call it that, at inpatient mental health facilities by only considering a single option do suggest a slipping back to the old ways of working, but I very much hope that I am proved wrong. More generally, I think that local government in Scotland does need to change in the way that it is set up. People quite rightly expect representatives they elect to be able to take decisions and to make things happen. But too often, however, this is not the case. Unlike any other level of government, councillors are effectively not fully responsible for what the council does. And while officers play an important role, and those in this council are undoubtedly dedicated public servants, the way in which councils are set up gives far too much power to unelected officials. In my view, as has already happened in England, the Standards Commission should be abolished. Rather than upholding good behaviour, it is far too easy to use the Code of Conduct as a means of preventing councillors from representing their constituents. Accepting matters criminal, the only people who should judge whether someone is a fit and proper person to be a councillor is their constituents through the ballot box. To end on a more positive note, I would like to pay tribute to all those local residents, community councils and voluntary organisations that I have worked with over the past 5 years. We're very fortunate to have such a strong sense of community spirit and resilience in Kinross. Without the efforts of local people and volunteers, particularly through the recent pandemic, the lives of so many in our community would have been much more difficult. May I conclude by taking this opportunity to wish those who are elected next week the very best in representing our county for the next 5 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Purvis. Councillor, no, it's not the councillor, it's the Chief Executive. He's been demoted. Chief Executive, Thomas.
Provost, thank you very much. I think it falls to me as one of your 4 Chief Executives in this term to offer a vote of thanks on behalf of the officer team within the council. We are part of this collective team working alongside you as elected members, and as somebody with only 6 months under my belt here, I do feel a little bit of a fraud, given I'm speaking to colleagues in chamber and on screen who have everything from 40+ years and less in terms of their representative roles. But notwithstanding that, I would like the opportunity just to say a thank you on behalf of the officer team to all of the councillors who we know are standing down at this point in time. A combined total of 165 years from what I've been advised, not all of them Councillor Wilson's, but reflecting that there is a huge loss in expertise to the council at this point in time. It will be for the electorate to determine how many of the rest of you return, and without fear or favour, we wish you well in next week's Cup final, to use Councillor McEwen's footballing analogy for the upcoming election. As the officer team, we are committed to working alongside you, respecting our respective roles in this team at Perth and Kinross Council. And for those who are leaving us at this point in time, our very best wishes. And for those who will be returning and the new councillors who will join you, you have my commitment and the commitment of the officer team to work alongside you as effectively as we can, making mistakes sometimes, but hopefully making a difference more often than that, and serving the people of Perth and Kinross. So my best wishes to all the councillors. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. I've got two more. We'll take two more contributions. Councillor Duff, and then Councillor Deputy Provost. Councillor Duff.
Thank you, Provost. I'd just like to take the opportunity to thank all of the councillors who are stepping down for their years of service to the people of Perth and Kinross, and for their friendship, advice and assistance to me over my 4 years in office. However, it would be remiss of me not to pay specific tribute to Councillor Lyle, who has led this council with distinction, with calmness and extremely capably, following the death of his friend and former leader and my predecessor, Ian Campbell. I'm personally grateful to Murray for his leadership, his mentoring and his friendship, and trust that we'll enjoy his well-deserved retirement from office. Thank you, Provost.
Deputy Provost.
Thank you, Provost. I can assure you I will be brief. I just would like to say it's been a huge privilege to have represented not only just Amond and Erdf, but my time representing Kinross. I think I'm one of the councillors who's had their wards split, so I've had to divide myself up into all sorts of bits to please everybody. But it's been quite a challenge changing wards, but I'm back home in the Amond and Erdf ward, which is my home, and I have thoroughly enjoyed being a councillor. There was no more surprise than me when I won the election way back in 1999, because it was only 6 weeks before the election that was actually asked. I thought, well, I've got nothing to lose and I'm not really doing very much just now. Well, my life certainly changed 23 years ago. I have loved every minute of it. I didn't maybe appear in the press very often, but my real reason was to work with people and do things to help individuals. And I think that's what a council should never forget. It's the people out there who get you in this chambers. And once you're there, it's up to you to do your best for everybody. Using the old guide analogy, always do your best. So I think I've tried, and I'd like to thank all officers. I've met many officers, some who are now big appointments, directors of education when I first appointed them as a head teacher at a primary school. So I think I've maybe made a few good decisions over the years, some maybe not, but I've loved it. I've loved working with all councillors of all parties, and I wish those coming back all the best. And remember, it's going to be really tough and you can't walk away when things go wrong. So good luck to you all, and to my fellow colleagues who are retiring. There is life after 2 High Street, so thank you.
Thank you very much, Kathleen. Thank you everybody for your contributions. It's very unusual to have valedictories. We have a few a year, and it's even more unusual to have 2. So this particular valedictory is for you, Willie. Councillors, before bringing today's meeting to a close, I would like to just say a few words about a good friend and colleague, Ur Willie, the father of the council, who retires after 42 years service. 42 years service is unprecedented as far as I'm concerned. Willie first stood for election 48 years ago in 1974 in the Carsagowrie ward. Willie was runner-up that year, and undeterred, he stood again 3 years later in the Oakbank ward, but he was runner-up again. Fortunes changed in 1980 when, at the 3rd attempt, Willie was elected to Perth and Kinross District Council for the then Oakbank, Cherrybank, Pitheadless ward as the sole Liberal in the then Conservative Administration Council. Willie retired from his role as senior manager with NHS Stayside at the time unitary councils were being finalised. and was able to devote nearly all of his time then to council work. And as we know, he does. Willie has held the post of convener on the Development Control Committee, vice convener of the Poly Resources Committee. Before that, his first convenership was General Purposes, and so on, because he mentioned them earlier. Willie is the well-kent face that has served his constituents diligently over the years, even as far as holding surgeries on the local bus. I know Willie has loved dealing with day-to-day casework, working with officers at all levels, attending and officiating at citizenship ceremonies, and officiating at birthday and anniversary presentations. Willie, I'm sure you'll have built up an encyclopedic knowledge of Perth and Kinross Council services. Having dealt with the mega thousands of constituents' inquiries you will have had over 42 years, and the wide range and breadth of issues they will all have covered. Willie's role as Deputy Provost has taken him to occasions such as the Thistle ceremony at St Giles Cathedral, the opening of the Scottish Parliament, swinning trips abroad to Cognac, meeting members of the royal family, including Prince Charles, and being an active participant in the Scottish Constitutional Convention prior to the setting up of the Scottish Parliament. He served for 3 terms on the court of the University of Dundee, which, when he was elected by the graduates to this role, included Bernadette Malone and Gillian Taylor. So Willie, what now? And I'm sure that you'll spend more time with your lovely wife Margaret and your 2 children. You'll have more time to enjoy more theatre gigs and concerts, and your garden will get a lot more attention. Perhaps some cycling and even some running will be the agenda, and I'm sure a holiday in Puerto Palenza in Mallorca won't be too far away either. Where, by the way, Willie, it's perfectly acceptable to wear your tennis shorts, because anybody that hasn't seen Willie's legs haven't looked properly. Willie, in recognition to your terms as convener of libraries, art galleries and museums, a special place has been reserved in Perth Museum and Art Gallery for your dictaphone machine and tapes. The description tag underneath will read the Radio Wilson years 1980 to 2022. So Willie, on behalf of every one of us in the council, and that's including all the offers and cleaners and all the everybody else, we thank you most sincerely for your outstanding service, and we wish you all the very best and a long and happy retirement. Thank you, Willie. Chief Executive Thomas would like to say a few words as well.
Thank you, Provost. It's no further words in relation to any of the councillors here. It was just to remind all councillors that given the timing of this council, the continuing guidance and an upcoming election, we would like to take the opportunity as council to invite all members back on the 12th of May to mark the end of this council more appropriately, and also say our goodbye to all of the councillors who believe us at this point. So we would really like to see everybody back on the 12th of May, enjoy a glass and to say goodbye properly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Members, can I ask you to approve the private session to consider the item, the final item that's on the agenda today? Do you agree? Councillor Stewart.
Provost, no, under Standing Order 17.1, I'd like to move that the item be held in public. We are talking about huge amounts of public money at issue here. It's right that the public should be able to see it. As Councillor Lyle mentioned earlier in the meeting, it is an important part of the economic strategy, and I think it's proper for it to be held in public.
Councillor Bailey, you want to say something?
Yes, please. Thank you, Provost. Happy to second Councillor Stewart's motion. I did speak with officers or had information forwarded to me from officers, and it's my understanding that the information that's actually confidential in this report under the specific terms of the LGA Act could be placed into a confidential appendix or something like that, because I fully agree that that some of the information we're about to consider needs holding in confidence. However, I think the core decision deserves the additional scrutiny that public and press input provides. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Lisa's going to advise.
Councillors, as you're aware, the recommendation from officers is that this is exempt information, and I totally accept that it's for council to resolve whether or not to hear the information in private or public. However, I would caution against having this matter dealt with in public. There is highly sensitive confirmation, commercially sensitive information within the papers, and it is inappropriate, in my opinion, for that to be shared in the public domain. It would be almost impossible to have a full and frank discussion about the terms and conditions that we are seeking to agree the proposal without breaching that exempt information. There is a reason why Schedule 7A exists, and it's to preserve the integrity of confidential discussions on commercially sensitive matters. We have sought the views of Henley Homes in terms of whether or not they're prepared for that information to be shared, and they have taken legal advice, and they consider it completely inappropriate for their commercially sensitive information to be disclosed in the public domain. So for that reason, I would caution against considering the matter in the public domain. We can then consider, once the matter is decided, releasing redacted paperwork alongside the minute to ensure that we are as transparent and open as possible. But commercially sensitive information and financial sensitive information needs to be preserved to ensure that the integrity of the relationship of ongoing commercial discussions between the council and this contractor and any other contractor in the future is preserved. So my strong advice to council would be that this matter should be considered in private.
Thank you, Lisa. Councillor McDade, do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Provost. Yes, I would like to ascertain if it would be possible to have a private discussion of the council to discuss the confidential aspect, and still to have a public vote. That will be in the public minute anyway, and therefore I see no reason why that shouldn't be on public record now before the local government elections next week. So we're going to make a decision today. The minutes will not be released for 2 months. There is no reason why, even if Councillor Stewart and Bailey's motion falls, that the vote should not take place in public for the public record, because it will be part of the public record anyway. So I see no reason why that should not be part of the public record today.
There currently isn't any specific provision around that.
Here we go. Just from what I can understand, and I believe, and I'm not quite sure what Councillor Stewart was that he was actually proposing a motion, although Councillor Bailey seconded whatever Councillor Stewart said. So I'm assuming it's a motion that we hear the paper in public. And Councillor McDade has proposed a hybrid, if you like, and I'm not sure if that's coming in as an amendment, Councillor McDade, and if you have a seconder. But my further amendment would be that we'd continue to hold the paper in private. And Councillor Duff, I think, will be happy to second.
Agreed. Happy to second Councillor Lyle's amendment. Thank you.
Provost, can I request we have a 2-minute recess, please?
What's the purpose of the recess? are you?
So that we can try and reach a consensus on this matter. It might not require a vote, which should be the aspiration of the council always, but particularly a week ahead of an election, I would have thought.
No, my point, I'm simply seeking to clarify, were you putting up a further amendment?
No, I'm requesting a recess to try and encourage a position that we can all get agreed on.
I'm happy to move to the vote.
Right, going to have a 5-minute recess. Okay, 5 minutes only.
Thank you, Provost.
Provost, it might be useful if I just clarify in terms of procedures where we're at. So we have a procedural motion from Councillors Stewart and Bailey, who have moved in terms of standing orders to hear item P1 in public. We have an amendment from Councillors Lyle and Duff that we hear, we continue to hear the item in private session. Unless there are any further amendments, then I suggest that in terms of standing orders we move to a vote to determine this. Okay, with no further contributions, Provost, I'll ask councillors now to determine, first of all, can I just check in terms of any elected members who are still virtual or any members who are here or may be aware of any connection issues during the time that's passed, but I believe everything is now sorted out. So if I can now ask councillors to confirm whether they're voting for the motion by Councillor Stewart. I'm just noting that Councillor Sarwar has left. Oh, Councillor Sarwar's now virtual, right, thanks. Okay, so if members can confirm if they're voting for the motion by Councillor Stewart or the amendment by Councillor Lyle. Councillor Ahern.
Amendment.
Councillor Bailey.
Motion.
Deputy Provost. Councillor Barnacle. Councillor Barnacle.
Amendment.
Sorry, is Councillor Barnacle still present virtually? I'm not aware of any connection issues. My colleagues are advising that Councillor Barnacle's left the meeting virtually. Councillor Liz Barrett.
Amendment.
Councillor Peter Barrett.
Can I just ask, there's a mobile phone number displaying as a participant in the meeting, and I don't know who that is.
I understand that's Councillor McCall.
Okay, amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Braun.
Amendment.
Councillor Brock.
Motion.
Councillor Donaldson.
Amendment.
Councillor Drysdale.
Abstain.
Councillor Duff.
Amendment.
Councillor Forbes.
Amendment.
Councillor Gray.
Abstain.
Councillor Illingworth.
Amendment.
Councillor James.
Amendment.
Councillor Jarvis.
Amendment.
Councillor Lane.
Abstain.
Councillor Lyle.
Amendment.
Councillor Massey.
Abstain.
Councillor McCall.
Amendment.
Councillor McDade.
Motion.
Councillor McEwen.
Abstain.
Provost.
Motion. Yeah, motion. Sorry. Amendment.
Provost, can you clarify if you're voting for the motion or the amendment?
The amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Pannett.
Amendment.
Councillor Pover.
Abstain.
Councillor Purvis.
Motion.
Councillor Rebeck.
Abstain.
Councillor Reid.
Amendment.
Councillor Robertson.
Amendment.
Councillor Sarwar.
Abstain.
Councillor Shires.
Amendment.
Councillor Simpson.
Amendment.
Councillor Smith.
Amendment.
Councillor Stewart.
Motion.
Councillor Waters.
Abstain.
Sorry, Councillor Waters.
Abstain.
Thank you. Councillor Williamson.
Abstain.
And Councillor Wilson.
Amendment.
Provost, there's 5 votes for the motion, 21 votes for the amendment and 10 abstentions. So the amendment is carried that we will continue to hear the item in private session. And I now suggest we have a short 2-minute recess to allow those members who are joining virtually to move from the first Teams invite to the second team invite for the private session, and all other members remain in the chambers. Thank you.